Chapter 1205. Xiuxin and the others are not suitable to take over the position of sect leader at all. It's one thing for them to have formidable strength, but with their current temperament and accomplishment, they can only serve as roaming generals, guardians, elders, and so on. At most, it's the limit of their ability to stay in charge of a region, and that's only after they've experienced many things and seen many things in the world. Yunyang said faintly. On the contrary, Yixing, Qinghang, and Mingxiu all have the potential in this area. Their ability to look at the big picture alone has already left Xiuxin and the others far behind. Yunyang smiled and said, "So, we don't have to care about these things. Let them do what they want." Yunyang's smile grew deeper and deeper. The residence of 9 Supremes is not my residence of 9 Supremes, nor is it the sect leaders. It's everyone's residence of 9 Supremes, and it's their residence of 9 Supremes too. Many years later we old fellows will be long gone. The future is theirs. Why should we dictate their path? Their future path is not our future path. Why do we need to decide it? When Kong Luiyue left, he was inexplicably shaken. Yunyang's way of managing the sect and his attitude towards power had astounded him. While other sects were fighting openly and covertly for the position of sect leader, the residence of 9 Supremes was using such a method to subtly cultivate the next generation. Kong Luiyue felt that he was utterly convinced and prostrated himself in admiration. Then he thought about what Yunyang had said, when the disciples can perform their respective duties and do well in all aspects. We, the seniors, should give up all the power and let them perform to the fullest. We're the founders of the residence of 9 Supremes. The purpose of our existence is to protect and escort this sect. There's no need to think too much about other things. In this world, strength is still the most important thing. The strongest fist is the hard truth. It's the most important thing to improve our abilities as soon as possible. Kong Luiyue left quickly, obviously wanting to inform the others of Yunyang's thoughts as soon as possible. A month later, the residence of 9 Supremes held a grand wedding. After more than a decade of love, Luo Dajiang and Jiang Luoluo, the pair of lovers, were finally together. All the upper echelons of the Phoenix Cry sect were present, and so were the upper echelons of the General Commerce League. There were also many nearby sects who came to congratulate them. Even the few sects that belonged to the middle-grade Celestial Luck banners had sent people to congratulate them, and their cultivation base and status in their sects were not low. The chief of internal affairs of the Sacred Heart Palace, Hui Yunfeng, had also sent his eldest grandson to congratulate him. He had also brought a congratulatory gift from the Sacred Heart Palace. He also sent a message to Yunyang. Temple Master Zhan said to invite Supreme Cloud to visit the Sacred Heart Palace more often when you're free. Since we met that day, it's a pity that we didn't meet sooner. It's best to keep in touch. Yunyang agreed with a bitter smile. How was this an invitation? It was clearly saying, when are you going to do what I asked you to do? Other than Yunyang's pained expression, the entire residence of 9 Supremes was draped in glowing colors, jubilant and joyous. The disciples were all beaming with joy, and all kinds of fine wine and delicacies were brought to them like flowing water. How could the residence of 9 Supremes not make a grand celebration of the first joyous event since its establishment? On the first day alone, the residence of 9 Supremes had consumed more than 34,000 caddies of fine wine. Luo Dajiang and Jiang Luoluo, the protagonists of the day, had never dreamed that their wedding would be so grand. Before this, the most perfect situation they had imagined was that they would elope successfully, hide in a remote mountain village, and spend the rest of their lives. Who would have thought that the wedding could actually be held in such a grand and unprecedented manner? It was unparalleled in the world, and it was a bustling scene rarely seen since ancient times. Gan Tianyin and Jiang Luoluo's parents were sitting in the most prominent positions, their faces beaming like flowers and their eyes full of joy. After bowing to heaven and earth and their parents, it was time for the couple to bow to each other. Just as Luo Dajiang and Jiang Luoluo stood up and were about to bow, Tai Qingcang, Ping Xiaoyi, and the others suddenly jeered, "Say a few words, say a few words." Following the banter between the residents of 9 Supremes' upper echelons, thousands of disciples also jeered, "Master, mistress, say a few words. Senior uncle, say a few words. You must say a few words." In the end, there were tens of thousands of people shouting at the same time like a tsunami. Luo Dajiang, who was muscular and tall in a bright red auspicious outfit, seemed a little overwhelmed with joy as he said, "It seems like I have to say a few words." Jiang Luoluo, who was usually gracious and unrestrained, was unprecedentedly restrained as she said bashfully, "Then say a few words quickly. Do you want me to say a few words?" Luo Dajiang cleared his throat and stood up. Just as he was about to speak, he paused and stood on a high stool. He was tall to begin with, and now that he was standing on a high spot, he was as lofty as a mountain. Today is my and Lolua's wedding day. You want to make fun of me and make me say a few words? Fine, I'll say them, but what should I say? Luo Dajiang's voice rang out like a bronze bell. I don't want to say pretentious words on a wedding day, and I won't say them. Words of gratitude are even more meaningless. It's all thanks to my brother that Luo and I can come this far. I, Luo Dajiang, will remember this favor. I'll only say one thing. I'm very happy and satisfied in the residence of 9 Supremes, and I'm willing to guard the residence of 9 Supremes for the rest of my life. This is my home, the home of everyone in this world. Also, you fellows who want me to say something. You know I'm not talkative, but you still want to force me to do something beyond my abilities. From tomorrow on, all disciples of the residence of 9 Supremes will have their training increased by 5 times. I'll supervise it myself, and this is the price for making you laugh at me. Alright, I'm done. That's all. Immediately there were wails below. Master, no. Senior uncle, no. Senior uncle, please don't. Luo Dajiang turned a deaf ear to them. He jumped down laughing and fell to his knees in front of Jiang Luoluo. Circulating his mystical qi, he said loudly, Luoluo, thank you for marrying me. Today, with heaven and earth as my witness, I'll be good to you for the rest of my life. His voice was so loud that it echoed in the sky like a thunderclap, reaching everyone's ears clearly. Jiang Luoluo's eyes were red. Fool, who else can I marry if not you? Is there a need to swear such a heavy oath? What Luo Dajiang had just sworn was a heavenly Tao oath. The moment the couple bowed to each other, it was also the moment when the heavenly Tao oath struck. The oath is granted. It was as if heaven and earth were also witnessing this marriage. The cheers were thunderous and deafening again. It was as if tens of thousands of people were shouting, their voices shaking the sky. After the couple bowed to each other 3 times, the residence of 9 Supremes leader, who was the master of ceremonies, shouted, Send them to the bridal chamber. Then, nearly 20,000 people shouted together, Send them to the bridal chamber. Deafening cheers and whistles soared into the sky, echoing endlessly and ceaselessly. We'll have a fat baby tomorrow? Yun Xiu shouted as her heart raced. The crowd was stunned. She was still a child after all, not even knowing how to make fun of someone. Let's drink. Yun Yang raised his goblet. The mountain is sealed today, no entry or exit allowed. Everyone drink to your heart's content. We won't go home until we're drunk, we won't go home until we're drunk. The residents of 9 Supremes will have enough fine wine and beds today. Awoo! Strange cries rose into the sky as the aroma of wine permeated the air. It was destined to be a sleepless night, a night of drunkenness. Ping Xiaoyi and Guanuanyang were up to no good eavesdropping, but were caught by Luo Dajiang and chased them out on the spot. Luo Dajiang was the bridegroom today, so his reputation was the residence of 9 Supremes' reputation. It could not be tarnished nor could it be injured. Both of them could only defend and not fight back the entire time. Even though it was 2 against 1, they were still beaten up badly. After they were beaten up by Luo Dajiang, they were beaten up by the Phoenix Cry sect's maiden family led by Gan Tianyan. They were chased all over the mountain, crying for help everywhere. The situation was extremely miserable. Not only did Yun Yang, Tai Ching-tsang, Kong Luoyue, and the others not lend a helping hand, they clapped and watched the show, adding fuel to the fire as they drank. Beat them up hard. Don't show mercy, don't leave us any face. All in all, it was a joyous night. 3 days later, Yun Yang summoned all the residents of 9 Supremes' upper echelons for a meeting. It was almost time to go out, so he had to arrange everything properly. The disciples can go out in batches after half a year. The original inner sect disciples will go out in batches from now on. The 9 peak masters will also go out in batches of 3, 3, 4. It's necessary to train one's judgment and experience when roaming the martial world. All those who are outside, prepare the sect's communication tool. If anything happens, ask for help immediately. Those who don't return for 2 months will be treated as dead. Once the situation is confirmed, send out a large number of people immediately, either to rescue or to take revenge. Elder Dong, please take care of me when I'm not in the sect. If there are matters to attend to, come back early. The residents of 9 Supremes can no longer lack you, a stabilizing force. Dong Qitian smiled. I'll go out for half a month or 10 days in the future. This period of time is more than enough for me to travel all over the 7 seas and 9 states. It's all up to you, Elder. Mingxiu. Yes, Elder Dong. When you're free you can visit Miss Bai and check on the progress of the Whitey's cultivation. Yes. Luiwa. Yes. You and Ruajuan are in charge of liaising with the Phoenix Cry sect. If there's anything, deal with it in time. Luo Dajiang and his wife will assist by the side. All right. When Shi Wuchen comes out of seclusion, tell him that I've asked him to roam the martial world and that he shouldn't blindly shut himself in. The edge of a sword should be sharpened. Waiting won't work. All right. Little Yi Nuanyang. Yes. Both of you choose your disciples according to your will. Focus on concealment and assassination that you're best at. However, the disciples from your sect are not allowed to go on missions when you think they're not mature enough. Avoid accidents as much as possible. Yes. Duo. Yes. Little Fatty stood up hurriedly. If anyone from the General Commerce League comes while I'm away, you'll be in charge of liaising with them. Set a date for the next meeting, no less than a month apart. Then get Dajiang and the others to inform me as soon as possible. The General Commerce League's line must not be broken. That's not it. Those old brothers who really read my book won't mind, but there are some who won't understand that I'm only looking at the number of chapters. GT. Chapter 1206. Understood, completely understood. Little Fatty agreed very readily. His face was still twitching from time to time. He glanced at Dong Qitian with some fear and shuddered again. During this period of time, Little Fatty's cultivation base had improved rapidly under Dong Qitian's special training and was about to advance to the pinnacle of first-tier Saint King. However, the price he had to pay was that he had lost almost 60% of his fat. As a result, his originally chubby face now had some wrinkles on it. Boss, are you going out? Yes, I'm going out. Is it convenient for you to reveal where I'm going? Not at all. Faced with Yun Yang's direct reply, everyone was speechless for a moment. How straightforward. After the assignment, Yun Yang, dressed in his fluttering purple robe as usual, strolled out of the field where the disciples cultivated as if he was on a sightseeing tour, as if he was on a patrol. Everywhere he passed, the disciples all bowed in an orderly manner, and they were extremely respectful. Yun Yang went all the way out of the residence of 9 Supreme's Mountain Gate. After walking for dozens of miles and making sure that there was no one around, he slipped into the side of the road and disappeared without a trace. After a long time, 2 figures appeared behind him. The 2 of them revealed themselves and looked ahead suspiciously. Where did he go? Didn't see him? Did anyone else find out? There were people watching from all directions, including high up in the sky, but none of the dozen of them had found out. Oh no, if his lordship finds out, we're really unlucky this time. We've been waiting here for so long and we've finally seen Leader Yin come out. How could he just disappear in the blink of an eye? What kind of cultivation method is this? It's so strange. The few people hiding in the dark gathered together for a discussion, then dispersed and disappeared quickly. Their movement techniques were also extremely mysterious. It was just that their figures had just disappeared, and they were still in the same open space. Dong Qitian and Yun Yang's figures quietly appeared. They've gone far. Senior, do you know which path these people are from? The only thing I can be sure of is that they shouldn't be under Soul Demon. Dong Qitian spoke with certainty. When the Soul Sect was destroyed, there were very few fish that escaped the net. Most of the subordinates of the Soul Demon, even if they were not Soul Demons, would still have some of the exclusive power of the Soul Demon. Whether it was human or demon, there would be no exception. That was the innate talent of the Soul Demon, and it was absolutely difficult to imitate or eliminate. However, these people clearly don't have such a mark on them. At the very least, it means that they haven't come into contact with old demon soul. Dong Qitian turned to look at Yun Yang and asked, "But why are you stopping me from taking these people down?" Yun Yang smiled faintly and said, "Because I don't want to be fooled. These people have been lying in ambush outside the residence of 9 Supremes since a long time ago, waiting for me to appear. Although they think that they've done it discreetly, how can they really not leave a single trace? Therefore, it's almost inevitable that they'll be discovered by us." In other words, these people were most likely sent by the people behind them to test me. Even if it's not a probe, those who are sent out like this are definitely not important people. Even if they are captured, they will hardly be of any use. Instead, they will alert the enemy and increase the number of variables. Yun Yang said, "So, it's better to keep them alive first." The corners of Dong Qitian's lips twitched. "Actually, people like you are what annoy me the most when I roam the martial world. It's obviously a very, very simple matter, but you people have to make it more complicated than the heavens. You plot, and people like me will fall into your trap if I'm not careful. It's really not satisfying at all. Can't you just do something to your heart's content? Yunyang laughed and said, I'd rather use my wits than my strength. Why must I use my fists for something that can be solved with my brain? Dong Qitian retorted angrily, then how do you expect people without brains to live? Who are you calling brainless? Then he asked again, are you really going? Of course I'm going. As the saying goes, those who are separated for a long time must be united for a long time, and those who are united for a long time must part. The relationship between the human and the demon race has been stable for a long time. Now that the chaos has reignited, it's destined that there will be a war. I'll go and take a look first. Besides, I'm still under the Sacred Heart Palace's command. If I don't go after this mission that Zhan Wufei has given me, there will be trouble in the future. Yunyang smiled. I have nothing better to do, so I'll take this opportunity to go and take a look. I'll settle this matter. There was another personal reason that Yunyang did not mention. Yunyang was extremely dissatisfied with the progress of his current cultivation base. It was simply too slow. His mystical qi cultivation base was advancing steadily, and he was currently at the advanced level of first-level Royal Saint, about to enter the pinnacle level. Such progress was of course not slow. On the other hand, the progress of the endless divine art seemed to have stagnated recently, with no progress to be made. The advancement of the endless divine art required a large amount of karmic qi. Previously, the residents of 9 Supremes had worked together to kill the human middlemen, which was considered a huge profit. However, there were limited human middlemen in the bound of universe, and the higher the level of the middleman, the harder it was to kill. Although the residents of 9 Supremes' ability was advancing at a tremendous pace, its actual ability had yet to enter the ranks of the top sects, and it really could not afford to offend the hidden major human middleman forces. Recently, the bound of universe's martial world had been very peaceful as well. It was difficult to encounter a situation where one could engage in wanton slaughter. Yunyang estimated that the endless divine art would require at least 300,000 points of karmic qi to advance to the next stage. The difference was considerable. If he were to stop at full accumulation, it would be difficult to collect it in 8 to 10 years. If that was the case, he might as well go and take a look at the demon race and try his luck. If I can't kill here, I'll go kill the demon race. That should work, right? Perhaps I'll gain what I lose. Dong Qitian sighed. Go. You're smart anyway, so you'll be fine no matter where you go. It must be someone else who's in trouble. Then he reminded Yunyang, if you're really in danger, you must crush the spiritual jade slip I gave you. Cultivation base is the most important thing in the path of martial arts, but you can only talk about the future if you're still alive. Yunyang laughed and agreed. With a flick of his sleeves, he soared into the sky and disappeared quietly. In the residence of 9 Supremes, Yunyang's legend did not stop. Instead, a new chapter was added because the residents of 9 Supremes had recently gained a Hall of God's Armament. As the name suggested, since it was the Divine Weapon Pavilion, it was not surprising that the weapons stored within were all divine weapons. What was truly shocking was the number of divine weapons stored within the Divine Weapon Pavilion. It could be said that the number of divine weapons within the Divine Weapon Pavilion was mass-produced. There was not a single one of the 18 types of divine weapons missing, and there were at least 100 of each type. Chapter 1207. This meant that there were more than 1,800 weapons in the Pavilion of Mystical Arms, and each of them was an upper-class weapon of superior quality. This information was too shocking. Apart from the unusually rich spiritual qi and the large number of talented disciples, the residents of 9 Supremes had another piece of news that could shake the entire bound of universe: an unbelievable number of mystical weapons. To the major sects that owned the celestial luck banners, although the residents of 9 Supremes had quickly climbed to the top of the lower-class celestial luck banners and even replaced the last place of the middle-class celestial luck banners as soon as the battle began, they still believed that the residence of 9 Supremes was just lucky and that its foundation was inevitably lacking. However, the truth proved that the residence of 9 Supremes' foundation was not only sufficient, it was so abundant that it made people's hair stand on end. The higher-ups of the Phoenix Cry sect, who were its neighbors, had felt it again and again. Not only was the residence of 9 Supremes unimaginably rich in spiritual energy, the disciples were all talented and outstanding, and even the supporting resources were excellent, which made people jealous and envious. So many mystical weapons were all listed in the Pavilion of Mystical Arms for the disciples to fight for. For example, the one who occupied first place for half a year in the tournament of 10,000 or the disciple who contributed a lot to the sect could enter and collect a weapon that suited him. The mystical weapons in the Pavilion of Mystical Arms were truly worthy of the name. The higher-ups of the Phoenix Cry sect had seen it with their own eyes. Every mystical weapon hidden in the Pavilion of Mystical Arms could become a sought-after item in the highest auction, even if it could not trigger a catastrophe in the martial arts world. All 1,800 weapons were the same. As long as one met the conditions, one could have such weapons. How many sects in the world could imitate such a practice? The Phoenix Cry sect knew that it could not do it. If it was only 3 to 5 weapons, it could still do it if the sect emptied its inventory, but more than 1,000 or even 2,000 mystical weapons. The thought of it sent chills down their spines. Could it be that Yun Yang, a child of his age, was actually a genius blacksmith who had never been seen before? Otherwise, how could he be so generous? The weapons in the Pavilion of Mystical Arms were naturally not forged by Yun Yang, but he had asked Emmy to make them. In fact, Emmy did not put much effort into those mystical weapons, and they were not top-notch weapons made by Yun Yang. However, compared to the weapons outside, even the legendary weapons and mystical weapons that circulated in the continent, they were not inferior. After all, they were produced by Emmy, and the materials used were rare metals and rare treasures of heaven and earth, so their quality could not be low even if they wanted to. It was the norm to be able to cut through metal like it was mud and to shatter gold and jade. Most importantly, the weapons that were nurtured by Emmy were already filled with spiritual air even though it was only a small taste. This meant that if a weapon master could be compatible with them, the weapons would have the chance to develop spirituality and transform into supreme divine weapons that could grow alongside their masters. Especially after Yun Xiaoxin exchanged for a famous sword, the entire residence of 9 Supremes was boiling. All disciples' eyes were shining with greed of mystical weapons. Who wouldn't like such a weapon? One must know that the residents of 9 Supremes had a written rule that no matter who was inside or outside the sect, even if they were the disciples trained by the Phoenix Cry sect, as long as they could be the champion of the tournament of 10,000 for half a year, they would get one. Phoenix Cry sect's initially gloomy atmosphere was lifted immediately. As for the Demiurge Flawed 10 and the others, they were more relaxed. It was not that they did not care, but because each of them already had a mystical weapon of a higher quality in their hands. In fact, they even had more than one. Take Ping Xiaoyi and Guanuanyang for example. Both of them were adept in the art of assassination and carried many items with them. Sects below the Celestial Luck Banner level might not be able to afford them even if they went bankrupt if they were to go bankrupt. Shi Wuchen was the only exception. Firstly, he had not come out of his closed-door cultivation, and secondly, his situation was different. Supreme Sword had his own way of the sword. The sword used by such a person must be custom-made and would never be a common sword. Moreover, Shi Wuchen's triatom sword had already been strengthened once, so he was not in a hurry to upgrade it. Yun Yang might as well put it aside and tailor it for him later. Along the way, Yun Yang deeply felt the fundamental difference between the Bound of Universe and Tianxian continent. The martial world's turmoil in the Bound of Universe was as natural as Tianxian continent's, but the murderous intent in the martial world was obviously much lesser than in Tianxian continent. It was probably due to the strict rules set by the Tianxian continent's founder. The restraining effect on the martial world was so great that few dared to go against it. Basically, those who walked the martial world rarely sought trouble. Occasionally he would see some honor-level martial artists, but most of them were entering and exiting the forests, searching for spiritual herbs, training, or capturing mystical beasts. They had different goals, but they went their own way. There was rarely any friction or estrangement. The major cities they saw along the way were quiet and peaceful. The common people lived in peace and contentment. Regardless of whether they had cultivation or not, they all lived their lives quietly. Those who had cultivation here were not just ordinary cultivators. Even those at the Venerable Realm, Saint Realm, and even Saint King Realm were like commoners without cultivation. They lived a quiet and peaceful life, working at sunrise and resting at sunset. To be fair, Yun Yang was rather envious of such a lifestyle. If the Tianxian continent could be like this, why would there be so many wars and tragedies to be avoided? Yet Yun Yang knew that it was impossible. There was a fundamental difference between the two places. The peace and tranquility of the Bound of Universe were all built on an absolute foundation of power. The almighty person who founded the Bound of Universe had single-handedly suppressed the entire world and conquered the Bound of Universe. No one dared to defy him. It was also because of his unparalleled power that he had directly set the rules of this world. Anyone who did not follow the rules would be struck down by lightning. It was precisely because of the existence of those rules and the threat of lightning punishment that no one dared to violate them, resulting in the current peaceful atmosphere. If the Tianxian continent could be like this as well. Yun Yang would have to reach such a level and set a similar rule for the Tianshan continent. Otherwise, how could the Tianshan continent enjoy such peace and tranquility? Suddenly, a thought came to Yun Yang. For me, this step can be said to be so far away that it's hard to reach the shore. Yun Yang pondered with a serious gaze. The Bound of Universe's master back then really had an indescribable and indelible deep affection for the Bound of Universe. However, who was this Bound of Universe's master? But there were no records at all, not even a trace of a word or two. Chapter 1208. Everyone knew that this was the rule set by Lord Monarch, but no one knew who Lord Monarch was, what his name was, or what he looked like. No one had the slightest idea of who he was. Tens of thousands of miles passed in a blink of an eye as they headed southeast. The number of people gradually decreased, and the number of trees gradually increased. Trees that had been growing for hundreds or even thousands of years could be seen everywhere. Correspondingly, the number of mystical beasts and mystical beasts along the way increased as well. However, what surprised Yun Yang was that not only was there a clear division between mystical beasts and mystical beasts, they were also irreconcilable. There were endless battles between mystical beasts and mystical beasts in the few huge forests that they had passed by along the way. The scale of the battle between the mystical beasts and the mystical beasts left Yun Yang, a veteran of the battlefield who had seen blood and gore, speechless. It was no longer a simple battle of hordes but mountains and seas. Moreover, it was an extreme battle that came wave after wave with no fear of death. Under normal circumstances, both sides would fight to the point where both sides were heavily injured before ceasing their banners and ceasing their drums and withdrawing their troops. The mystical beasts were not afraid of death, and the mystical beasts fought with all their might as well. However, most of the mystical beasts chose to retreat, while the mystical beasts followed suit and recuperated. Both sides fell into a temporary period of peace, entering a period of recuperation before the next great battle. On this day, a dense forest appeared before Yun Yang. This was the boundary of Tianan. Looking up, Yun Yang saw that the forest in front of him was unusually vast, like he had never seen before, as if there was no end to it. As Yun Yang thought about it, he soared thousands of feet into the air. Looking down at the forest from this position, he still could not see the end of the forest. At this moment, the forest gave Yun Yang the impression that it was the only forest left in the world. There is actually a forest that occupies such a vast area in this world. If I didn't see it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed it. Yun Yang exclaimed in his heart. Do not enter a forest when you are in it. This was a saying that was accepted by the martial world. This was because the larger the forest, the more powerful the mystical beasts or mystical beasts would usually occupy it. Under such circumstances, such a location had practically become a natural place for high-grade dark beasts and demon beasts to take root and reproduce, and there were very few exceptions. Yun Yang understood this, of course. Therefore, he stood by the edge of the forest and looked at the forest that had turned dark and gloomy several feet in. He hesitated for a long time, wanting to turn into a cloud and fly straight in, but somehow, there seemed to be an invisible force that urged him to go in and take a look, to see what was going on. The forest in front of him. The sparse forest in the distance gradually extended over, becoming denser and denser. However, the depth of the sparse forest seemed to be at least 1,000 miles. Upon closer inspection, there were still some traces of human beings. For example, the knife mark on the tree and the axe mark on the other side were obviously caused by chopping firewood. However, such traces became rarer the further in one went. After all, normal adventurers would never dare to enter a place like the vast forest in front of them. Reaching the nearby area was probably their limit. Just in terms of geographical location, this is the only way to reach the Blood Soul Mountain Forbidden Area. Why is this a place that must be passed through? There shouldn't be such a huge forest in a place that must be passed through between the two realms. Yun Yang mumbled in his heart, this is obviously a dangerous place, but why do I still feel that I have to go in? What is it that has attracted me here? Could there be some powerful presence inside that is calling me in with a special method? Or could it be that some sort of force is affecting my state of mind? Yun Yang had always been a cautious person. Once he thought of this, he was shocked and quickly retreated tens of thousands of feet away. He found a relatively spacious place and carefully cultivated the art of frozen heart, checking his entire body from head to toe. This included deific consciousness, mystical chi, endless force, and even the divine edge. Everything was checked from head to toe, and Emmy was asked to check again from a third party's perspective. Aya? Emmy was displeased. There's no problem at all, why do you want me to make this trip? What are you trying to do? Don't you know that I, Lord Emmy, am very busy now? Where would I find the time to do this? Looking at the hundreds of acres of herb farm in his deific consciousness space, Emmy felt a sense of accomplishment. With so many elixirs, as long as they take shape in a few more days, there will be a huge amount of life energy for me to absorb. There's no problem, there's no external force to tempt me, but I keep feeling that there's something here that needs me to go in. Yin-Yang frowned as he pondered. Why is that? There were always some legends in the martial world that spiritual items would choose their masters. When one arrived at a place, there would be some sort of telepathy. Following the telepathy, one would then be able to find some rare treasure of heaven and earth. Whether it was in the bounded universe or the Tianshan continent, there were too many such stories. However, Yin-Yang had his doubts about this. How many people were born in this world every day? How many would die on this day? Who would be the fated one then? It was hard to say. Usually, such situations only depended on the quality of the treasure, whether it was good or bad. Treasures had a certain level of spirituality, it was true, but it was rare for a treasure's spirituality to choose its master. Instead, it would use its own energy to exude an aura that could tempt one's heart, luring them over. However, it was hard to say what kind of person would be lured over, and what would happen after that was even harder to say. Perhaps one would be sucked dry by the treasure after being lured over. This possibility was not an exaggeration, it was the highest possibility. Life was not a legend, nor was it a myth or a legend. Not everyone was the main character. Yun-Yang calmed himself down and carefully confirmed his current state again. He pressed a few medicinal pills under his tongue and connected his deific consciousness with Emmy. Only then did he cast his wind form, turning invisible and drifting slowly into the dense forest, almost following Emmy's steps. His speed could be said to be the lowest he had ever been since he cultivated the wind form. He kept his eyes and ears alert at all times. He would flee at top speed if anything went wrong. Through the void, a certain someone had observed his careful actions and commented, "I've seen many children of destiny, but this is the first time I've seen one who's so cautious and afraid of death." "It's truly an eye-opener," someone beside him said, "but he still went in, didn't he?" The person snorted and said, "If he was in front of me, I'd most likely slap him to death just by looking at his cowardly look." "Is he still a man?" The person beside him snorted coldly. "You can slap him to death even though we're separated by space. Why don't you try? All talk and no action. Are you still a man?" The person snorted again and cursed under his breath before he stopped talking. The youth dressed in white beside him guffawed maliciously, baring his fangs and brandishing his claws without a hint of decency. One chapter could have been published, wouldn't it be too much to split it into 3? Chapter 1209. Yun-Yang had only advanced a few hundred feet when he suddenly heard the rustling of the bushes beside him. With a slap of his palm, the bushes buzzed with activity immediately. As the wind from his palm swept past, loud noises reverberated in the air. Yun-Yang looked towards the source of the sound and saw a large silver-white snake that was as thick as a water bucket scampering away in a panic. Then there was movement on his left. A spider the size of a millstone flew out from between two trees with a swoosh. Rustling sounds could be heard beneath his feet. Golden ants that were at least the size of his feet covered the ground that was at least a few hundred feet in circumference. There were at least tens of thousands of them. As they flew in all directions, it was like a receding yellow tide. Yun-Yang was speechless. *CK There are too many of them. Isn't it just average? I only wanted to take a look. Why are there so many of them? Moreover, these were all mystical beasts. There were no ordinary wild beasts or insects at all. Following Yun-Yang's advance, he startled countless mystical beasts of all sizes along the way. Yun-Yang saw that there were no less than hundreds of thousands of them. There were those that flew in the sky, those that ran on the ground, and those that crawled in the soil. There was everything that one could think of, nothing was too strange. About 300 miles in, the surroundings grew darker. The sky could no longer be seen when Yun-Yang lifted his head. Just as Yun-Yang was about to launch another palm strike to check out his surroundings, he saw a new sign. With a strange rumble from the ground, the thick layer of withered leaves surged up as large silver-white ants leaped out of the ground. The corners of Yun-Yang's lips twitched. Were these still ants? This was clearly a rabbit, okay? Each of these ants was slightly bigger than an average rabbit. Compared to the white-e's original size, 5 white-e's added together might not even be as big as one of these ants. As soon as the ants came out, they began to emit a strange hissing sound. As the sound spread, the ground within a radius of several hundred feet began to churn. The ground was like the waves of the sea rolling endlessly. After a while, more and more silvery white ants came out. Just like before, they kept spreading out and more ants appeared. In the end, the ground was covered with silvery white ants, boundless and borderless, with no end in sight. The most terrible thing was that after these ants drilled out from the ground, they didn't move again. They just stood quietly on the withered leaves, their cold eyes looking left and right, their almost 2 feet long antennae swaying back and forth. The hundreds of beasts at the front even raised their front antennae, and their hind legs were obviously accumulating power. Impressively, he had already assumed an offensive stance and was ready to strike at any time. Yin-Yang was dumbstruck. Are they going to fight? Isn't this ant a little too ferocious? Yin-Yang grew more cautious, hiding his presence as much as he could. Only then did he manage to shake off this bunch of ants that looked like battle maniacs and continued to move forward. Individually, these ants were only second-level mystical beasts no matter how big they were. With Yun-Yang's current cultivation base, he could kill hundreds of them effortlessly with a wave of his hand. However, according to Yun-Yang's judgment, although these giants were not of a high level and were only mystical beasts at the periphery of the forest, there was a high chance that they were the overlords of this area. There was no other reason for this. Their numbers were just too many, like an ocean. Thousands and tens of thousands of them were mere fractions to the ants, insignificant. Based on the movement just now, at least hundreds of thousands of ants had appeared. The total number of ants that had gathered here could very well be more than 10 million. Perhaps even more. Faced with such a large number of species, even 9th-level mystical beasts or higher-leveled mystical beasts would not simply come and provoke them. It was just like how an ant was insignificant in front of an elephant, but a colony of ants that exceeded a certain scale could devour an elephant. In many cases, quantitative change was enough to influence qualitative change. However, this extremely large number of giant ants was only the overlord of this land. In other words, they were the gatekeepers of this forest. From this point onward, Yun-Yang could no longer find any traces of humans who had entered the place as he continued forward. Those ants were basically the most solid fortress that blocked all traces of humans here. No one could take a single step forward. From Yun-Yang's perspective, there should not be many in the bound of universe who had the ability to break through the blockade of these ants and reach the forest safely. It would have to be at least 2 levels higher than Yun-Yang's current level to have any hope. Along the way, Yun-Yang could see ghastly white skeletons everywhere he went. There was also a faint demonic air lingering in the air. These were, of course, the remains of demonic beasts. This was not surprising. Too many demons had perished here in the past, and there was no lack of highly skilled ones among them. It was normal for their remains to have remnants of demonic air. However, what caught Yun-Yang's attention was something else. Some trees that looked old and as thick as 7 to 8 people hugging each other had all been broken without exception. Yun-Yang had not paid much attention at first, but along the way, he had seen many such trees within a radius of several hundred feet. Some of them had been broken while the others were still intact. Some of them had not even been damaged after walking for dozens of miles. The difference was obvious. Looking at the withered trees that had long lost their vitality after being broken, Yun-Yang frowned and pondered. He could not figure it out for a long time. It was only when he realized that the broken trees were covered in bite marks that he understood. Demonic beasts might follow their instincts to pluck the young leaves for food, but they would rarely target the trees themselves. Since these trees were in a similar state, then these broken trees must have been deliberately broken by the mystical beasts. Even if he had figured this out, the mystery was still unsolved. In fact, the clouds of doubt were even thicker. What was the reason for the mystical beasts to do this? Yun-Yang pulled out his saber and dug out the roots of one of the trees that had not completely withered. After careful examination, he realized that the tree was already decayed and could not be saved. However, there was still a faint demonic air lingering in its roots. So these trees have the chance to become demons because they have been around for a long time. Yun-Yang's gaze was cautious. This means that when the mystical beasts patrol the forest, they have to get rid of these trees as soon as they see them. For some reason, Yun-Yang suddenly felt sympathy for the mystical beasts in this forest. The forest was originally the mystical beasts' paradise. With more trees, the mystical beasts could be better concealed and formed a natural barrier and cultivation ground for the mystical beasts. On the one hand, the mystical beasts here needed the lush trees to maintain their reproduction, but on the other hand, they were afraid that the trees would grow too lush and become a threat to themselves. It was truly a dilemma, a difficult balance to strike. After some time, the mystical beasts on the periphery were left far behind. Yun-Yang could vaguely feel that he was about to reach the center of this dense forest. Unexpectedly, there was not a single mystical beast in this area. It was eerily quiet. Chapter 12:10. Yun-Yang was not surprised at all, for his attention had been attracted by another harvest. The heaven and earth treasures that grew in this area were far more abundant than those in front of him, and they were arranged rather densely. As Yun-yang walked along the way, he had only casually collected them along the way and had already stored hundreds of them into his deific consciousness space. More than 90% of these harvests were items that were tens of thousands of years old, while the lowest quality ones were 7 to 8,000 years old. It was quite a bountiful harvest. Later on, Yun-yang no longer collected those spiritual herbs that were 5 to 6,000 years old that were hard to find in the outside world. It was all because they were no longer to his liking. How extravagant! Emmy, who was in his deific consciousness space, cried out in joy. It did not expect the surprise to come so soon. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind blew above his head. Yun-yang was stunned. Looking around, he saw many flying mystical beasts gathering in his direction from all directions. There were huge mystical cranes with a wingspan of 4 to 500 feet, gigantic goshawks, and colorful gigantic peacocks. Yun-yang even saw a large flock of golden eagles as well as many other types of flying mystical beasts. Yun-yang recognized some of them, but there were also many that he did not know. They flew south in groups at an incredible speed. After a while, banging sounds could be heard from the other side of the forest. It was obvious that a large number of mystical beasts were sprinting towards him for some unknown reason. From the sound of the ground getting closer, it was not difficult to guess that the incoming beasts were exceptionally large beasts. Yun-yang could not help but be shocked. The many mystical beasts in the sky and on the ground were obviously gathering towards the same place. Something big seems to have happened. Otherwise, why would there be such a commotion? Yun-yang wanted to find out what was going on, so he increased his speed by a third more. After sprinting for no less than 3,000 miles, a loud rumble came from the front. Although it was far away, the new frequent and concentrated sounds of collisions were audible. Shrill screams rose and fell in succession, often sounding out in waves. They lasted for a long time and rarely stopped. Another few dozen kilometers ahead, the sound grew louder and louder. Countless shen beasts could already be seen charging towards a place where a cloud of smoke was rising, charging in. The shrill cries of eagles rang out as hundreds of golden eagles swooped down in a neat formation in the sky. What followed was a deafening explosion that drowned out all other noises. While Yun-yang felt deafened, he could also feel the ground beneath his feet shaking violently. However, this shock was nothing compared to the shock in his heart. Those golden eagles arrived together, yet they immediately chose to rush down and self-destruct. Why were they so resolute? This, however, an even more terrifying scene followed. After the golden eagle, many other condors also followed suit and rushed down, and then the crane, batch after batch. Countless enormous flying profound beasts charged forward in a fearless manner as they self-detonated and died, using their very lives to detonate themselves to the limit of their power. Yun-yang was inexplicably shaken. He could clearly see that when these flying mystical beasts charged down, their eyes were gleaming with the determination to die, but there was also a hint of reluctance. It was an indescribably tragic sight. However, they still charged down without hesitation, using their flesh and blood to turn into the most brilliant fireworks to kill the enemy. Enemy? Where was the enemy? Or rather, what was the target of these flying mystical beasts? He did not seem to see it. Yun-yang floated another 7,000 feet forward unwillingly and looked as far as he could. Finally, he saw that there was a door hidden in the air on the empty ground. It was hundreds of feet tall and 1,000 feet wide. Countless strange-looking demonic beasts were madly rushing out of the door. The point of contention was the inside and the outside of the door. One side wanted to charge out with all its might, while the other side wanted to stop the other party by risking their lives, killing every beast that came out. Even if they were not strong enough, they would forcefully stop the other party's attack by self-destructing, blowing up most of the beasts that were about to charge out and ensuring that they did not lose. Yun-yang pondered. The door was dark and seemed to be connected to another world. Could it be the realm of demonic beasts? At this time, there were a dozen or so extremely sturdy high-level shen beasts at the forefront. They were clad in golden armor and had crowns on their heads. They were fully deserving of the title of the strongest combat force on the side of the shen beast. Just a casual punch or kick from them would cause the roar of mountains and the roar of tsunamis. Behind them, there was a large group of shen beasts taking turns to attack. The mystical beasts gave their all, even going as far as to self-destruct. The power of the attack was immense, enough to shake the heaven and earth. There was no doubt that the mystical beasts in the door could not come out for the time being, but no matter how ferocious the attack was, there would come a time when it would end. Not only were the number of beasts that surged out of the door massive, their individual abilities were not weak either. The combination of quantity and quality increased exponentially. Yun Yang realized that some of the beasts that surged out now already possessed the ability of a Saint King. Furthermore, there would be one or two stronger beasts that were almost at the level of a Saint Emperor joining the battle every quarter of an hour, causing the balance between the two sides to be even more unbalanced. It was also at this time that the cruelest time came. The king-level combat force of the mystical beasts had been at the front line all along, so their combat force had been depleted. Both sides' actual abilities were about the same. Now that one side was not at full strength while the other side had rested for a long time and even had the advantage of sneak attacks, it was no longer an easy task to intercept them perfectly. In fact, it was almost impossible. Whenever this happened, a group of flying mystical beasts would descend from the sky and resolutely rush over to launch a self-destruct attack, blasting these powerful existences back. Then, the mystical beasts on the ground would come forward in waves to fight, forcing the mystical beasts back or directly slaughtering them all. Piles of corpses of mystical beasts and mystical beasts were continuously thrown out. In fact, the word, thrown, was not the right word to describe it. As the battle went on, the shockwaves from the impact of the demonic energy and mystical chi would send the corpses flying and shattering. Flesh and blood had already dyed the entire space. The space within a radius of hundreds of miles was filled with a pinkish air that reeked of blood. As the battle continued, the situation became more and more tragic. Yun Yang's gaze suddenly focused on the extremely sturdy golden-furred bear in the middle. Yun Yang saw that the golden-furred bear king was panting heavily but still waving his huge bear paw. Go. 7th team. Go. 9th team go. First. Chapter 12:11. Behind the golden-furred bear king, thousands of golden-furred bears lined up into a dozen or so small teams, entering the battlefield one after another. Fighting alongside him was a group of tigers with sharp golden horns on their heads. There were also 3,000 to 4,000 of them, and they were also divided into a dozen or so small teams, continuously entering the battlefield. After fighting for less than a quarter of an hour, they had to immediately retreat and regroup, and the next squad would take their place. The cycle repeated itself. Beside them were other species such as lions, bulls, leopards, and so on. Generally speaking, most of the combat forces of the various teams were resting. However, every Shen beast was basically covered in blood, wounds, and bruises. Why is the opening this time so big? This is really troublesome. The voice of the huge golden-furred bear was full of confusion and depression, but the king and the others have all gone to the pool of holy light. The opening of the pool of holy light that only happens once in 1,000 years, can't be interrupted in the middle no matter what. The monster tide broke out at this critical moment. It's really 2F** king stupid. Beside him, a golden-furred tiger with a human body and a tiger head grinned and said, "What the F***ck are you complaining about? Just do it. Are you a male? If you are, don't say you can't." Why can't I? I just think the situation is not good, and the situation is not right. You can't. This was a mystical beast with a human body and an eagle head covered in black feathers and a pair of huge wings on its back. It looked at the golden eagle that swooped down from the sky in sorrow, and its voice was a little choked. 4,000 of our eagle brothers have already died in this door, this F** king. Just as he was speaking, he suddenly heard a strange creaking sound coming from the spatial gate again, as if it had expanded on its original foundation. At the same time, a single horn flashing with lightning appeared, and it could rush out of the door at any time. F***, another Saint Emperor has come out, the golden-furred bear roared. Silver Snake. Go blow him up. The team split into two sides and a silver snake shot out like lightning. When its body was still in the air, it had already begun to expand rapidly. In the blink of an eye, it had already turned into a huge body that was hundreds of feet long and as thick as a house, and rushed into the special door without any explanation. However, the silver-white snake coiled up, forming the innate ability of the snake race, the coiling snake array. It suddenly blocked the entire door tightly, leaving no gap. Then there was a hissing sound and it was as loud as it could be. Then there was a loud bang. The silver snake had self-detonated. With this extreme self-detonation, a large space within the door was instantly cleared. Countless pieces of flesh and blood splattered into the sky along with the aftermath of the self-detonation. Then a shrill scream rang out as it instantly flew far away. In the short period of time after the self-detonation, the mystical beasts had clearly taken the opportunity to attack, but there were no demons rushing out of the door. Obviously, the self-detonation of the silver snake was so powerful that it had temporarily cleared the other side of the door. It was a pity that the emptiness only lasted for a short while. In the short span of a breath, countless demonic beasts came out of the door again like a geyser. Around the door, other than the countless broken limbs, there were countless broken weapons. Even the mace in the golden-furred bear king's hand had already been completely sheathed. The mace no longer had its fangs and it could no longer live up to its name, so it could only be used as a stick. As the continuous collisions and battles continued, after Yun-yang noticed the mace, it broke into 3 pieces in less than a quarter of an hour. A roar came from the door, "Rush over! We must rush over. As long as we rush over, this sacred land of Tianfa will be ours." Countless demons howled and screamed from the other side of the door, their faces filled with ferocity. As for the mystical beast here, although their fighting spirit had not waned, they had expended too much energy and were gradually showing signs of fatigue. Facing the demons that were surging out like a tidal wave, normal combat methods could no longer stop them. They could only resort to self-detonation, using the most extreme and last resort method to stop the other party. Yun-yang watched as flying mystical beasts continued to approach from all directions in the sky, one after the other, determined to die. He tried his best to maintain his direction, but the number of mystical beasts around him was dwindling. The few mystical beasts that were leading the pack were all wearing a helpless and tragic expression. "I can't hold it anymore. I can't hold it anymore." There was a limit to a human's strength, and it was the same for the mystical beasts. Every time this strange door opened, it would be open for at least 3 days, and these 3 days were Tianfa's nightmare. Other than the dozens of high-level kings of the mystical beasts taking turns to fight, they also had to support the strongest mystical beast army in their tribe to fight to the death to ensure that they did not lose. Right now the kings were not here and the army was almost depleted. Only a little more than a day had passed, not even a day and a half. What were they going to do for the rest of the time? Judging from the current situation, even if they threw in all their remaining forces, including a few of their leaders, it would still be difficult for them to survive for more than 2 days. Then, in the remaining day, there would be at least hundreds of millions of demons rushing out of this door. When that time came, it would be the true catastrophe. No. Tianfa has guarded the Sky Demon door for millions of years, it must not fall in our hands. The Golden Bear roared with grief and indignation, "Bear King tribe. Here. Prepare to self-detonate." Yes. With an orderly shout, the 3,000 giant bear warriors behind him stood up. Every bear's face was filled with grief, anger, and determination, without a shred of fear. "Now let our Bear King use his life to defend the glory of Tianfa." The Golden Bear roared. Although he had expended a lot of his energy and was in a weakened state, this roar was not any weaker than when he was at his peak. However, a faint glint of tears flashed in his large eyes. He wasn't lamenting for himself, but for the many compatriots and comrades who were about to join hands and go to the netherworld together. The 3,000 bear warriors beat their chests and roared, "Even if Tianfa is humiliated, we will not live to see it." Their voices were deafening. Although the demon race was the great enemy of the human race, the mystical beasts and humans were not friendly either. If he interfered rashly, the result would be unpredictable. Even if the strength of these high-level mystical beasts were not complete, they were still far above him. If he suddenly appeared and attracted the attacks of the mystical beasts, would he be able to survive? He could not afford to take this risk. Unexpectedly, a voice rang out from nowhere. It was a woman's cold voice, thin as a thread but extremely familiar to Yun-yang. Yun-yang helped them. Chapter 12:12. Yun-yang raised his head to look around, but the voice did not appear again. Although it was only for a moment, although it was only a soft word, Yun-yang was shocked. It was very familiar. That is. Yun-yang recalled the peerless expert in white who had taken Shangguan Lingxiu away when he was about to leave the Tianshan continent, the otherworldly beauty of the white-clothed woman. At May. Yun-yang was shaken. So, it was this battle that attracted me here. There is indeed something I should do. What I should do is to help the holy land of Tianfa defend against the demon race. Emmy, prepare more water of vitality, I have a great use for it. In the space, Emmy let out a cry, but it was filled with doubts. Of course he would help now. Aunt May had no ill intentions. Yun-yang was certain of this, but he still had his previous concerns. These mystical beasts were basically in a killing frenzy. How could he make them believe that he was not an outsider? Why not attack him at once? Yun-yang did not care about being attacked, but if he were to be attacked now, he would be a huge hindrance instead of being of help. Yun-yang's eyes flashed as he instructed Emmy. On the other side, the kings of the mystical beasts were barehanded, about to launch their last extreme attack. Suddenly there was a soft sound, and a huge saber suddenly fell in front of the golden-furred bear. The giant saber was 70 feet long, and its blade alone was 30 feet thick. Just the back of the saber was nearly 3 feet thick. Where did this saber come from? The golden-furred bear king was immediately puzzled. However, all of the weapons he possessed had already been broken and could no longer be used. At this moment, a saber had fallen from the sky. It was like a long drought meeting sweet dew. He didn't have time to think too much and had already grabbed it. Ayaya. This long saber looked like a large size, but when he held it in his hand he realized that it actually weighed almost 10,000 jin. It was a heavy saber. All of you move away. Let me try this saber to see if it's sharp. Bear King let out a loud roar and brandished his saber as he charged forward alone. Then, the next scene caused all the Shen beasts on the other side to be dumbfounded. They watched as the Bear King brandished the huge blade in his hand, and a snow-white blade light appeared in response to the blade, directly attacking the Shen beasts. All the demon clan members who came into direct contact with him, including their weapons, were chopped into pieces like a bunch of lanterns. The saber's momentum was not yet exhausted. A rough estimate showed that at least dozens of demon clan members had been chopped into two. The result of the battle was extremely glorious. The Shen beasts were most troubled by the strong bodies of the demon race, but when faced with this broadsword, they actually had no ability to resist. It was like a sharp knife cutting through tofu, and there was no obstruction at all. The golden bear was excited. Good knife, good knife. Everyone retreat and rest. Wait for this prince to kill for a while. Before he finished speaking, a person really charged forward with a blade in his hand, completely disregarding the exhaustion and injuries on his body as he swung his blade to his heart's content. That golden-furred bear king's blade only had one move, from east to west, from west to east. It was like he was cutting chives. A large piece was cut, a large piece was cut, and the harvest was actually unprecedented in this battle. Although the demon clan's strength was not weak, and they had more people, the terrain was still too disadvantageous for them. There was only one door and they could only charge out. It was difficult to use the tactic of using numbers to its fullest. On the other hand, the Bear King's side could move around freely, accumulating power, and it was truly a case of one man holding the pass against 10,000 enemies. But as time went on, even though countless demon clan members had died, the demon clan's side continued to charge out without fear of death, completely disregarding the price, disregarding the sacrifice. Indistinctly, a furious roar could be heard from the other side. Charge! Charge! Take down Tianfa at all costs. The Bear King laughed loudly. He had never felt so carefree before. Guarding the door here, the difference between having a divine weapon and not having one was like the difference between heaven and earth. The fatigue that was originally all over his body seemed to have disappeared, leaving only incomparable excitement and the pleasure of killing so many demon clan members. Awesome! This is too awesome! The saber light danced, turning into a silver-white flood dragon. From east to west, from west to east, it actually sealed the door with the power of a single person. The Bear King was fighting, but the other kings of the mystical beasts were not idle. All of them turned their heads to look around. *CK where did this saber come from? How can there be such a divine weapon in this world? Even the legendary unparalleled divine weapon can only be this powerful, right? Why did a saber fall from the sky when the battle is at its most intense? There must be something fishy about this. May I ask which expert is it that is helping us? Please show yourself. A crane king with a long neck cupped his fists and said to the sky. Yun Yang's silhouette slowly appeared in the air as he said with a smile, "It's nothing much. Beast kings need not be so courteous." Before the gift of the saber, it would have been asking for trouble if he had shown himself. He would definitely have been attacked from all sides, and it would have been a matter of life and death. However, now that he had shown his goodwill and gifted the saber, especially after witnessing the saber's power, there would be no more problems. After all, without the help of this saber, perhaps the entire Bear King tribe would have died en masse. A divine weapon that had fallen from the sky had actually turned the entire battle upside down. It was no small matter, it was an important one. May I ask who you are? The Crane King stretched his long neck, his eyes filled with doubt. This person had shown his goodwill and gifted the divine weapon. It could be said that he was helping a building that was on the verge of collapse, saving a country that was on the verge of collapse. There was no doubt that he was a friend and not an enemy. However, how could there be such a human in the depths of Tianfa? Not to mention the depths of Tianfa, even the periphery had been completely cut off from the traces of humans due to the giant ant's barrier. This young man before him did not have a high cultivation base, so how could he have come here? In any case, the young man before him was the one who had lent him the saber, and he was indebted to him. The Crane King suppressed all the doubts in his heart, and his attitude was very friendly. I am Yun Yang, the leader of the Residence of Nine Supremes, a sect with a middle-class celestial luck banner. I have an important matter to attend to in the demon race to pluck a unique spiritual herb. When I passed by this place and saw the battle, I was touched by the heroic battle between the mystical beasts and the demon race, so I have come to lend you a hand. My cultivation base is shallow, so I can only lend you a few weapons to assist you. Yun Yang explained his origins and whereabouts clearly in a few sentences. The battle was still ongoing, so it was really not suitable for a long speech. It was more appropriate to cut to the chase as soon as possible. So it is sect leader Yun who has graced us with his presence. We greet you. The Beast Kings looked even more amiable. As the middle-class celestial luck banner appeared behind Yun Yang, it immediately proved his identity and stance. Coupled with the goodwill of lending the divine weapon, the Beast Kings naturally returned the goodwill. Thank you, thank you. The Crane King took a step forward and grasped Yun Yang's hand, his eyes extremely eager. Sect leader Yun, thank you very much. I wonder if there are any more divine weapons like this? If there are, that would be great. Chapter 12-13. They were all top-notch experts. Naturally, they could tell at a glance that the saber that Yun Yang had taken out was undoubtedly a divine weapon in this world. It was almost at the level of a dreamlike weapon. However, even if it was of such quality and effectiveness that it had almost turned the tide of the battle, it was still not enough to completely change the course of the war. This was because this divine weapon alone was not enough to support the consumption of the war. There was no divine weapon in this world that could not be worn out. The sharper a divine weapon was, the easier it was to be damaged. Among the Beast Kings who had lived until now, which of their divine weapons was not a spiritual weapon that they had forged with their life's effort and nourished with their own souls? Isn't that a E-grade weapon of outstanding quality? Yet they had all perished in this battle. It was not that the divine weapons were not strong or sturdy, but there were simply too many demons. In the blink of an eye, the weapons in their hands would collide with the enemy's weapons hundreds and thousands of times. With the strength of the Beast Kings, killing dozens of demons was something that could be done with a wave of their hands in a normal battle. However, in the current atmosphere and the intense battle situation, there was no time for them to rest. No matter how powerful the weapons were, they would still be destroyed. Not only were the mystical beasts fighting with all their might, the demons were also fighting with all their might regardless of the cost. After all, whether the demon race could come out and invade the bound of universe again depended on this battle. Whether the mystical beasts could defend themselves also depended on this delicate point of time. The saber that Yun Yang had lent had a dreamlike effect, turning the tables and temporarily relieving the dire situation of the mystical beasts. However, no matter how sturdy the saber was and how it was stronger than the spiritual weapons that the Beast Kings had forged with their entire lives, it could not last more than 2 hours. In spite of this, Yun Yang's declaration of, "My cultivation base is shallow, I can only lend you a few weapons to assist with one or two things," had vaguely revealed a piece of information. Yun Yang had at least one weapon like the saber in King Bear's hand, maybe even more, and he was willing to help. The news was too shocking and precious. Although the saber had only been in King Bear's hands for a short period of time, its power had basically been displayed by King Bear. It was obviously a rare divine weapon. To the mystical beasts, it was already a great favor to be able to obtain one of these weapons. Why did this young man sound like he still had more and was willing to lend them? Then this battle might not necessarily be hopeless. Of course, with only 2 or 3 such weapons, while they could temporarily turn the situation around and even gain a certain amount of buffer space, it was still not enough to completely change the overall situation. However, it was still much better than despair and hopelessness. Yun Yang frowned slightly under the gazes of the mystical beasts, his mind working quickly. He had collected countless rare metals in the past. It should not be difficult to make dozens of similar divine weapons. However, in reality, the rare metals had to be broken down and filtered by Emmy, all of them turned into the essence of the essence. The essence obtained was actually only a small portion of the original amount. Even with Yun Yang's inventory, after taking out this saber at all costs, the remaining materials could only be used to make 5 or 6 more. The weapons used by the mystical beasts were too costly in materials. Just the construction of this saber alone had consumed tens of thousands of caddies of the essence of iron. 5 or 6 of these weapons did not seem to be enough to completely turn the tide of the battle. The final outcome could still be the complete annihilation of the Holy Land of Heaven's punishment. However, who was Yun Yang? He quickly found a way to turn the situation around. After a moment of thought, he said, "This lowly one still has 2 weapons like the saber from before. It's not a problem to lend them to all of you, but a few weapons is like trying to put out a burning cart of firewood. It won't help the overall situation. I'm thinking, can I ask the Beast Kings to collect all the broken weapons first? I'll see if I can think of a way." At this moment, Yun Yang acutely found the solution to the current situation. There was not much rare metals left in his space, but the broken weapons scattered all over the place were ready-made materials that could be used to deal with the crisis. Does sect leader Yun mean to repair the damaged weapons? The eyes of the group of Beast Kings lit up. Mystical beasts of this level had their weapons picked from countless superior weapons. The weapons that were most compatible with them were spiritual weapons that had been nurtured and watered with blood for a long time. They were no different from a part of their bodies. It was also because of this that everyone had suffered considerable damage when the weapons were broken earlier. It would be great if they could be repaired. However, was there any way to do it? Although there were cases of spiritual weapons breaking due to excessive wear and tear and being repaired by expert craftsmen, such repair work not only consumed a lot of spiritual gold and rare metals, but also took time to repair. Even if the young man before them had such a method, how could he have the time to repair the weapons in a leisurely manner? Looking at the Beast King's wounded and hopeful eyes, looking at the intact flesh mill, Yun Yang was silent for a moment before he said, "This lowly one has another secret art. As long as the damage isn't too serious and it's not completely broken, it can be repaired quickly without much of its original function being depleted." When the Beast Kings heard this, they immediately cheered in unison. Even those that are completely broken can be used as casting materials. Before Yun Yang could finish his words, he saw a dozen Beast Kings turn around and roar in unison. "Collect all the remains of the damaged weapons. Even if they're broken. Even if they're broken. The remnants of the demon race? Yes, yes, yes. I want all of them." Many hands made light work. Yun Yang rolled his eyes as he watched the group of bruised men run away. It was only a moment later. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. There were already thousands of broken weapons piled up in front of Yun Yang, and this was only the first batch. There were still many strong men rushing over from afar, carrying broken weapons as if they were chopping firewood. From afar they looked like a giant porcupine. Swoosh, swoosh, a mountain of various weapons was piled up in front of Yun Yang at a speed visible to the naked eye. As far as the eye could see, it was full of broken weapons and broken blades. Among them, the lightest condition was a weapon that was broken into 3 or 4 pieces. It could no longer be used. At this time, a few Beast Kings all had a flattering smile on their faces. They grabbed their weapons and came over. They had a flattering look on their faces. "Leader Yun, take a look at this. Let's see if it can be repaired quickly." "Sect Leader Yun, look at mine first." "What a pity. You have to take a good look." Chapter 12:14. On the other side there was a sudden roar. It was the Golden Bear King who shouted, "Someone take my place, I can't hold on anymore." So far the Golden Bear King had held on for almost a quarter of an hour. At this time the Golden Fur Bear King was sweating profusely, as if he had just been fished out of the water. With the current environment of continuous high-intensity combat, even if the Golden Fur Bear King had boundless strength, he couldn't hold on any longer. The Golden Bear King had been charging at the front line and had exhausted a lot of his energy. Now that his natal weapon was damaged, his physical condition was deteriorating. It was already commendable for him to fight until now with vigor and excitement after obtaining the mystical weapon. Right now he could barely lift the saber in his hand. The saber was too heavy after all. The Golden Tiger King let out a loud roar and pounced forward. It caught the broadsword and brandished it like a tiger. At the same time, it kicked the Golden Bear, sending it flying dozens of zhang away before crashing into the ground with a loud rumble. The Golden Bear King bared his teeth. F***CKU Tiger 11? Can't you F***King be gentler? N. The Tiger King's action of kicking the Bear King was half to send the Bear King away from the danger zone, and the other half was probably a little envy, jealousy, and hatred. Just a fool like the Bear King was actually able to obtain such a divine weapon before this king. "If I don't give it a kick, I'll feel guilty and the heavens won't forgive me. Beast Kings, please pass down the order, don't let anyone self-destruct for now." Yun Yang said hurriedly as he busied himself. Now that Tiger King is holding the fort, he should be able to hold on for some time. Everyone, conserve your energy for now and recover your energy. The more you recover, the better. I still have some healing medicine here, it should be of some help. Healing medicine? The Beast King's eyes turned red again. The Holy Land of Tianfa had already prepared a lot of healing medicine to stop the demon race's invasion. However, this war had come too suddenly. The celestial demon's door had opened without any warning and the war had come. Furthermore, the opening of the door this time was far greater than any of the previous times. Unfortunately, the kings of the Tianfa Holy Land had all gone to the Holy Light Pond, and the Shen beasts that had rushed over were fighting with their lives on the line. They barely managed to stabilize the situation, but they were still in a miserable state. From the appearance of the demonic energy, the opening of the gate, the demons surging out, to the temporary stabilization of the situation and the strict defense of the gate, only 10 minutes had passed. However, thousands of mystical beasts had been injured and thousands had died in battle. It was so fast and so cruel. He threw the ointment into his mouth and rushed up. By the time the reinforcements arrived, their battle lines would have already collapsed, and they might not be able to hold on any longer. Batches after batches of injured, batches after batches of medicine. And the medicine from Tianfa Holy Land was not very effective. Perhaps it could be said that in a normal battle, it could already be considered a saint-rank medicine. However, in this kind of battle atmosphere, it was far from being able to keep up with the consumption. Some medicines would have no effect after being taken a few times. Towards the end of this battle, the millions of mystical beasts on their side were almost all injured. How much medicine would they need to consume with so many injuries? If there were enough medicine, there would not have been so many mystical beasts that chose to go to the extreme and self-destruct. Half of it was because they were willing to die defending the gate with their lives, and the other half was because they were helpless. Hearing Yun Yang's words, the Beast Kings perked up at once. How could they have forgotten that humans always carry a lot of things that they can't use in a battle? They did not know that Yun Yang's situation was different from ordinary people. It was not that he did not need them or that he did not have any place to use them. It was just that looking at these beasts, he felt that they were inexplicably adorable. Looking at them guarding the gate, doing everything they could to prevent the demons from coming over, the blood and sacrifice they had paid, the shock in Yun Yang's heart had never stopped. Emmy took out hundreds of bottles of medicinal pills from the space. There are 100 pills in each bottle. Just take one regardless of the severity of your injuries. The Golden Bear tribe was obviously more cunning. Rolling its eyes, it said, "Warriors of the Bear tribe, each take one." Thousands of Bear tribe warriors stepped forward, each taking one pill in their hands. The pills were only the size of soybeans placed in their giant paws. They would not be visible if they did not pluck at their fur. The bears did not hesitate, swallowing the pills in one gulp. The other tribes wanted to take the healing medicine as well, but the Golden Bear tribe stopped them with a slap. "Take it later. See how it works before you decide." Yin Yang rolled his eyes. This Golden Bear King was rather clever, knowing to experiment. However, he could not be blamed for being careful in such a war situation. After about half a cup of tea's time, the mystical beasts of the bear tribe cried out in surprise, "My dantian is heating up. My strength is recovering, it's recovering very, very quickly. My internal injuries are recovering, oh my god, they're really recovering. My scars are recovering. I'm not bleeding anymore. It's really a miracle medicine." This is a miracle medicine. How can a miracle medicine be so effective? An awkward expression appeared on the Golden Bear King's furry face. He walked over and bowed deeply. "Sect leader Yun, please forgive me, I'm a little stupid." Although he understood that the other party's actions were understandable, Yun Yang, who was still a little uncomfortable, was almost amused by him. The little bit of grudge he had melted away instantly. The Golden Bear King was overjoyed when he saw the smile on the other party's face. You, don't be angry at me." "Ahaha." Then he said with a salivating face, "Sect leader Yun, brother Yun, the medicinal pills are still a little too little, can you give me more?" Yun Yang was speechless. This fellow's face changed really quickly. Looking around, he realized that although he had given out a lot of medicinal pills, the number of mystical beasts participating in the war was even greater. It was true that each of them could not get a single pill. Even for the injured mystical beasts, 10 of them might not even get a single pill. "Your Excellency Bear King, please help organize the Pinnacle Combat Force." Yin Yang frowned. "Let's gather 10 Beast Kings together. I have a counterattack plan that might be able to turn the tables and end this war." As he spoke, the Golden Tiger King flew back. It was the King Leo who had gone over to continue the battle. As for the heavy saber that Yun-Yang had tossed out, there were actually many small nicks on it. This is bad, that mystical weapon is starting to be damaged. The Golden Tiger King was panting. The 2 long scars on his forehead added 2 more horizontal strokes to the word King on his forehead. Looking at it now, it was actually Wang Er. As he spoke, he stroked his beard in discomfort. Damn it, these Fey actually cut off half of this king's beard. I'm really not used to it now. Chapter 12-15. In terms of quality, the heavy saber Yun-Yang had given was undoubtedly better than the spiritual convergence weapon that the mystical beasts had nurtured for their entire lives. However, it still lacked the ability of the spiritual convergence weapon and its owner to support each other. Having been imbued with mystical chi by 2 high-level mystical beasts, the saber had reached its limit when it fought against countless demonic weapons and was physically strong. If another 2 beast kings were to take turns, the saber would not be able to continue and would follow in the footsteps of the broken weapons on the ground. Seeing that the mystical weapons could not last any longer, the beast kings could not help but feel worried. It's all right. Yun-Yang quickly kept the broken pieces of the weapons into his space and handed them over to Emmy to decompose and convert. During this period of time, another mountain of broken weapons that was even bigger than the previous one rose from the ground. From afar, mystical beasts were still moving more broken pieces over. A group of flying mystical beasts hovered in the air, panting, their round eyes staring unblinkingly at the door that was suffused with demonic chi. Once they realized that there was a gap in their line of defense, they would rush down and self-destruct to fill the gap. Yun-Yang gathered the 10 beast kings together. With a low grunt, Emmy began to imbue the chi of vitality into them. 1 for each of them. The moment the 10 beasts received the chi of vitality, they could acutely feel that their exhausted bodies, which could not be sustained by sheer willpower, were suddenly washed away. Instead, they were filled with an inexhaustible amount of energy. The many wounds that covered their bodies disappeared in the blink of an eye. Even their cultivation base had skyrocketed inexplicably. It had only been a blink of an eye, but they had already broken through the barrier that they had not broken through for thousands of years. The mysterious energy of unknown origin was still growing rapidly in their bodies. Oh my God! Without exception, the 10 beast kings felt as if they were about to die from bliss at this moment. Their gazes that looked at Yun-Yang were burning like a volcano that had erupted. The leader of the residents of 9 Supremes was obviously a god. Clang, clang, clang. Dozens of weapons were tossed on the ground. They were all powerful and deadly weapons. Yun-Yang said, "With these and the fact that all of you have recovered to your peak condition, taking turns to fight while the rest recuperate, isn't it difficult to guard this door?" It's not difficult at all. The Xian beasts nodded their heads like chickens pecking at rice. Their eyes were filled with ferocity, and they wanted nothing more than to devour the Xian beasts on the other side. Everyone had recovered to their peak condition, even better than when they were at their peak. Complemented by these elite weapons, the Beast Kings would have dared to try even if Yun-Yang had asked them to launch a counterattack on the other side of the demonic race's gateway, let alone just taking turns to guard the gateway. Just as Yun-Yang finished speaking, he plopped down on the ground without a care for his image, looking like he was too tired to move. He said weakly, "Then, let me rest for a while." This was naturally an act. However, at this moment he had no choice but to act. He was afraid that he would not be weak enough. He simply wanted to spit out a few ounces of blood to show that he was extremely weak. There were tens of thousands of mystical beasts' eyes in front of Yun-Yang, all of them focused on him, their gazes filled with passion and flattery. It was as if a miser had seen a peerless treasure. An old bachelor who had been thirsty for dozens of years suddenly saw a naked peerless beauty. The effect of the life aura from before was simply too good. This was only the ones who had seen it. If those who had not come, it would be like the entire Tianfa Holy Land had moved, gathering all the mystical beasts' attention on Yun-Yang alone. How many mystical beasts were there in the Tianfa Holy Land? Billions of them, could only be more. If each of them was given a strand of chi of vitality, Emmy would probably die of exhaustion in no time, let alone Yun-Yang. The so-called killing with a gaze seemed like a joke, but if the gazes of billions of living beings were all focused on one person, would one be able to take it? Even if one was condemned by 1,000 people, one would still die without any illness. This was the gaze of billions of living beings. How could one be so lucky? The golden-furred bear king said gratefully, "Sect leader Yun, did you hurt your foundation by healing us just now?" The beast kings were no fools. Since when had there been such a miraculous power in this world? What happened just now was not only to heal their injuries and restore their condition, but also to elevate their cultivation base, helping each Beast King to take another step forward. It would be strange if such a heaven-defying skill could be obtained without paying a considerable price. Yun Yang waved his hand weakly and said with a smile, "It's all right, it's all right. The mystical spiritual chi just now was created by my sect's arcane skill. It's a hindrance to me, but it's not a huge problem. I'll be fine as long as I rest for a while." The same goes for the method of refining the essence of the broken weapons. Now blocking this door is the key. Everything else is insignificant. The Beast Kings were silent for a moment before they bowed in unison. They knew that Yun Yang had said this to put everyone at ease. Looking at him, the consumption of his sect's arcane skill must have been considerable. It might not be completely unscathed, or it might even leave a lasting disaster. It was only right that such a mystical skill that was unimaginably powerful and effective came with a huge price to pay for the user. They were strangers who had met by chance and did not know each other, but he had made such a huge sacrifice for everyone just because of a little bit of karma. The Beast Kings remembered this friendship in their hearts. "Everyone hold your ground. We must guard the door. Don't let anything slip through." The Tiger King roared and took the lead. Their current state was even better than when they were at their peak. With the aid of Yun Yang's medicine and the powerful divine weapons in their hands, they could take turns to rest and recover their energy. In addition to that, there were so many mystical beasts under their command. There would not be any major problem with the demonic beast stampede before them. A few kings went forward to urge the army while the Monkey King stayed by Yun Yang's side to protect him. "Your Excellency Monkey King, may I ask what's going on with this door?" Only now did Yun Yang finally ask this question. Just as he asked the question, he suddenly froze. Because at this moment, countless strands of karma chi inexplicably flew into his divine sense space. While Yun Yang was pleasantly surprised, he sensed that the firefly flags that he had harvested this time were unprecedentedly rich, gushing into him like there was no end to them. As Yun Yang's thoughts raced, he quickly turned his head to look at the many beast kings who were slaughtering the demons. His heart was filled with a sense of absurdity. Needless to say, the source of this sudden karmic chi was the countless demons that the Beast Kings had killed together. The karmic chi rushed in like a tsunami. Chapter 12:16. The Chi of Karma. He was completely unprepared for it. Yun Yang was dumbfounded for a moment. But what kind of explanation was this? Yun Yang was stunned and immediately tried to recall. When he had thrown out that broadsword, the Beast Kings had killed the demonic beasts, but there had been no karmic retribution. Now the weapons were still the same and the ones fighting were still the Beast Kings. The ones controlling the weapons hadn't changed and the weapons hadn't changed either. How could there be karmic retribution? Was it because he had given the chi of vitality? If there was a difference between the two times, it would probably be the difference in the chi of vitality that had led to this shocking change. Did this mean that there had been such a change after he had given the chi of vitality? That's about it. Yun Yang pounded his chest in regret, causing a string of nagging. "I should have realized it earlier. Why didn't I realize it earlier? I should have realized it earlier." As he realized it, he could not help but recall that there had been two similar incidents in the past where the chi of karma had returned. However, the amount of chi of karma had been too little and there had been no more after that. Yun Yang had not paid attention to it because the amount was too little. Now that he thought about it, it was the two people he had given the chi of vitality back then, Song Changgong and Li Yisin. These two old seniors must have done something to repay him with two streams of chi of karma. However, the two old seniors were obviously not people who liked to fight. With their status, there were even fewer people who needed them to fight in the battle for the Celestial Luck Banner. Therefore they had not had the chance to fight since then, so there had been no more chi of karma. It must be so. Combined with the chi of karma now, Yun Yang was finally certain. Yun Yang felt like crying from his stupidity. If he had discovered this earlier, he would have improved by leaps and bounds a long time ago. He did not know that the Monkey King beside him was looking gloomy. What did this sect leader Yun mean? He had asked him a question just now and he had hurriedly started to explain. However, when he looked up after explaining for a long time, he looked like he was daydreaming and obviously did not listen to a word. He had wasted half a day's worth of saliva. Moreover, he was lost in thought for a very long time. I couldn't bear to look at his remorseful face. After a long while, Yun Yang finally snapped out of his trance. His gaze when he looked at the Sky Demon's gateway was sparkling as if he was looking at a priceless treasure. Good stuff. This was definitely a rare and valuable item. If I was here every time every door opened, wouldn't that be awesome? In just a short while he had killed no less than thousands of demons. Just thinking about it made him happy. Monkey King, please speak. Yun Yang composed himself and said with a smile, my apologies, my apologies. I was distracted just now. The Monkey King cursed in its heart. You're clearly out of it. However, there was no other way. The person in front of him was the great benefactor of all the Shen beasts. No matter how impolite he was, he had to accept it. He could only repeat it from the beginning. However, there were some things that were naturally like telling a story, full of enthusiasm. But after saying it once, if the other party said, I didn't hear you, please say it again. This kind of feeling could often make people depressed to death. However, it had to be said that the feeling would only be more uncomfortable and awkward. Back then, when the bound of universe was first judged, there were only mystical beasts, not demonic beasts. At that time, there was an almighty being of the universe who was the greatest senior in the history of the Holy Land of Tianfa. It was said that this senior was very close to the Lord Sovereign who created the bound of universe. Their relationship was so good that they could sleep together. This is how I describe it. Listen carefully. The Monkey King scratched its ears and cheeks as if trying hard to fill in something. I understand, I understand. I'm done with it. Yun Yang nodded solemnly, thinking to himself, good enough to wear the same pants. This monkey is uncultured and has a limited vocabulary. What kind of description was sleeping together? If it could really be described in that way, wouldn't it be that and that? This monkey really didn't understand the ways of the world. Our greatest senior set a rule for the deities of the Holy Land of Tianfa. The beast kings of the Holy Land of Tianfa will never leave Tianfa in this lifetime. Yun Yang was stunned. Why is that? At that time this senior said, as long as the beast kings don't leave Tianfa, they're still beast kings. Once they leave the land of Tianfa, they'll attract humans into the Holy Land of Tianfa. Once someone steps in, Tianfa will no longer be Tianfa. Unless the entire bound of universe is at the juncture of life and death, the deities of the Holy Land of Tianfa will never be allowed to walk in the mortal world. It was obvious that the Monkey King's eyes were filled with a strong longing for the outside world. However, it was more of a reverence towards this rule, not daring to cross the line. At most, it would only think about it in its heart, that's all. I see. No wonder there are so few high-level kings of mystical beasts in this world. So this is the truth. Legend has it that after an unknown number of years, a peerless great saint of the demon race suddenly appeared in the bound of universe. He crossed the starry sky and fought with the local aborigines. No one could defeat him. The commotion caused by that battle was extraordinary, directly shattering half of the bound of universe. In the end, Senior Monarch appeared and fought with this great saint of the demon race. At the last moment, this great saint of the demon race broke through the void with a strike of his staff and shouted, I have no intention of dominating the continent, but there are thousands of ways of Tao. I have to leave a path for my people to transcend. I can't kill them all with just a few words. He shouted and said, in the 3,000 reincarnations I will only strike once, to fight for a chance of survival for the demon race. I hope that Monarch will give me some face. I will owe you a favor. After the great saint of the demon race finished speaking, he roared and left. As for that rod of his, it was left in the bound of universe. It was said that Lord Monarch pondered for a long time and said, it's good that there's a threat. After saying that, he left without a care. After another few thousand years, the golden rod that pierced through the heavens and the earth suddenly disappeared. After that, the heavenly demon passageway appeared in the void. Billions of demons descended upon the bound of universe. Yes, that is where the current demon race originally came from. Oh, so that's how it is. I really wish I could have been born a few years earlier so that I could personally witness such an extraordinary battle. Then could this door be? However, during the battle, the great sage's staff pierced through the desolate battlefield and the land of heavenly punishment. It was because of that staff that he created an eternal heavenly demon passageway. Senior Zishu tried everything he could to destroy that passageway, but he couldn't. This is the Sky Demon Gateway, the passage that connects the demon realm and the bound of universe. Mobile reading access, M. As for their opponents, the Saint Emperors of the demon race, they used two huge hammers that were over 100 feet long. They were using heavy weapons to fight heavy weapons head-on. Each time the machete landed on the giant hammers, sparks would fly in all directions. The sound of impact was deafening, like thunder from the nine heavens. Yun Yang could already tell the outcome of the battle in the blink of an eye. Although the two sabers were attacking in unison, the attacks were continuous, shards of weapons were already flying out of them. As for the opponent's hammers, there were also shards falling off from time to time, but they were massive and could not be completely destroyed in a short amount of time. They could hold their ground for a while. In other words, if the Bear and Tiger Kings could not win quickly, they would only allow the opponent to stabilize their footing and truly step into the other realm. After a while, the Holy Emperor's Holy Emperor had already stepped half a foot out of the gate. Demonic chi surged again, soaring into the sky. The Monkey King squawked and stood up abruptly, obviously wanting to lend a hand. On the other side, countless mystical beasts pounced forward as well. Many of them had even activated their self-destruct mode, fighting to the death. At this critical moment, just as the Monkey King was about to fly to the rescue, Yun Yang sent a giant hammer over. It was at least 1,000 feet wide and weighed hundreds of thousands of pounds. "Take this." The Monkey King reached for it but could not move it. He shouted at the top of his lungs, "Bear, over here." The Bear King turned back and saw the humongous hammer. He was overjoyed and roared, "Hold this side." Without saying a word, he retreated and rushed over. In the sky, 10 mystical cranes cried out and swooped down. With a loud bang, they had already self-destructed on the opponent's hammer. A total of 10 high-level mystical beasts with mediocre cultivation base had self-destructed at the same time. The power was extraordinary, causing the Holy Emperor of the demon race to take a step back. It was only a step away, but hundreds of Bear Tribe warriors charged forward with their chests puffed out, roaring as they charged forward without a care for their own safety. As far as the eye could see, a large amount of blood splattered onto the ground. However, the opponent's giant hammer was still not destroyed. It continued to hammer ferociously and madly, causing countless Shen beasts to be torn apart and sent flying away. Seeing that their Holy Emperor had gained the upper hand, the demon race's morale could not help but soar. They began to gather and charge forward. There were already too many mystical beasts that had revealed half of their bodies. Did this mean that the gate of Heavenly Demon was about to fall? Chapter 12:18. Seeing that the Sky Demon Gate was about to be breached, the Golden Tiger King's eyes widened. Suddenly he let out a long roar, and his body reverted to a huge golden tiger. He leaped up and his body emitted a dazzling light. This was the prelude of a Beast King-level Shen beast self-detonation. Clearly, the Tiger King was determined to use his life to defend the line of defense, even if it was only for a moment. On the other side, the Bear King had transformed into a huge bear. He raised his huge hammer and roared, "Get out of the way!" Xian Qi erupted from his body, and he charged forward with his hammer. The Golden Tiger King, who was about to self-detonate, couldn't help but become wild with joy. It roared and gave way. When the huge hammer flew past its body like a meteor, the Golden Tiger King pounced on it and exerted its greatest strength to increase the hammer's forward momentum by at least one-fold. The huge hammer head smashed into the Sky Demon Gate with the momentum of splitting the heavens and splitting the earth. More than half of the Bear King's huge body also entered the Sky Demon Gate. The sound caused by this attack directly caused the entire Tianfa Holy Land to shake. A mushroom cloud mixed with countless pieces of flesh and blood soared into the sky, dyeing the entire sky of the Gate of Sky Demon crimson. The two giant hammers of the demon race's Saint Emperor were smashed into smithereens without any resistance at all. The original owner of the giant hammers was directly smashed into smithereens. His spirit was instantly destroyed. He could not be more dead. At the side, the Monkey King and Lion King reacted with lightning speed. Before the shockwaves from the explosion had dissipated, they rushed out and grabbed onto one of the Bear King's legs, dragging him and his hammer back with all their might. The Bear King's head was already badly mutilated, and there were more than 100 wounds on it. The Bear King had used all his strength to push his Yuan Qi to the limit, and had even transformed his body to its greatest state. Only then was he able to wield the gigantic hammer that weighed hundreds of thousands of Jin with his own strength. After unleashing that strike, he had already exhausted all of his strength. Bearing the shockwaves of the impact head-on had already caused him to suffer heavy injuries. Because of that strike, half of his body had been sent to the demon realm, and he had to endure even more attacks from the other side of the demon realm. If not for the Monkey King and the Lion King's timely rescue, he would have lost his life. At this time the Bear King was naturally still alive. He stood up shakily with great difficulty, but he immediately fell backwards. And the greatest contributor to that strike just now, that huge hammer had landed on the ground with a loud boom, causing the ground to tremble. Even though Bear King was injured to this extent, he still did not let go and forcefully dragged it back. But then again, if not for this huge hammer blocking most of the attacks from the front, the Bear King would have really died with only half of his body in the Sky Demon Gate. He would have followed in the footsteps of the demon race Saint Emperor who had used the hammer earlier. With a thud, the Bear King's body fell to the ground, and fresh blood flowed out from his body. The Xian beasts behind dragged the Bear King back, and the Lion King and the Tiger King each wielded a huge machete, once again guarding the Sky Demon Gate. The demon race that was attacking crazily was once again suppressed back to the state before the huge hammer appeared. But the machetes in the hands of the two Beast Kings had already turned into saw blades, and only white light could be seen when the two Beast Kings swung them. Many of the demonic beasts that surged out were chopped into pieces, and they did not pose a threat. At this time the Crane King and the Eagle King ran over frantically. Do you still have more big weapons? Do you still have more? The two Beast Kings were well aware of their own limitations. Although this sledgehammer was mighty, it wasn't something that they could use. In the entire demonic beast race, perhaps only the Ox King and the Bear King could barely use this sledgehammer. Before the two of them could reach him, Yunyang had already flung out two more machetes with a shake of his hand. The two Beast Kings cheered, each of them carrying the machetes and flying up into the air, landing like lightning. Tiger and Lion, take a break. The two Beast Kings took over from the Tiger King and the Lion King, continuing their massacre. The Tiger King, the Lion King, the Ox King, the Crane King, the Eagle King, the Snake King, the Crane King, the Monkey King, the Eagle King. The Beast Kings took turns to attack, killing until the sky darkened and the world was dyed red. Compared to before, the sacrifice of the mystical beast warriors was much lesser. Batches of them fell and were carried back to be rescued. However, in times of crisis, there was no lack of mystical beasts who would rush forward and self-destruct. Yunyang had gone mad as well, taking out medicine and weapons without a care for the consequences. He collected the weapon fragments continuously, and in the end he no longer cared about the quality. Emmy, there's no need to be too detailed. Just smelt these together and turn them into a huge saber. It has to be heavy, it has to be big, and most importantly, it has to be sturdy and durable. Not only a huge saber but a hammer, an axe, a mace, all of them are fine. As long as it's lethal enough, it's fine. Therefore all kinds of crudely made weapons were used one after another, and the entire day passed in such a cycle. There seemed to be an endless number of demonic beasts on the demonic race's side. They only had one thought, and that was to charge out. In just one day Yunyang had almost collected the 300,000 pieces of karmic chi that he needed. Countless demonic race members were beaten to a pulp the moment their heads popped out, but there was still an endless stream of them rushing out from the gate of Heavenly Demon. The moon hung high in the sky. On the other hand, the battle at the gate of Heavenly Demon was still in full swing. Countless mystical beasts were lying on the ground within hundreds of miles of the vicinity, riddled with wounds. These were the mystical beast warriors who had been injured to the point where they could barely hold on to their last breaths. If it were not for Yunyang's medicine that could make up for their deficiencies, these mystical beasts would not have died from their injuries even if they had survived the battle. Up until now, most of the mystical beasts that had gone on the battlefield and fought had retreated with such fatal injuries. If their injuries were slightly lighter, they would not have left the battlefield at all. Those who were really lightly injured looked ashamed and sad instead. Hundreds of the superior-grade weapons that Yunyang had created had been damaged so far. Emmy in his deific consciousness space was so tired that its leaves were drooping. It could not understand what this fellow had encountered outside. Wasn't it just a fight between a group of mystical beasts and mystical beasts? Let them fight beasts. What does it have to do with us? What does it have to do with Emmy? Why should it poke its nose into other people's business? Do you know how much chi this Lord Emmy has lost in this day? Do you think it's easy for me to condense strange metals? With the arrival of the next day's dawn, the attacks of the mystical beasts did not slow down. Instead, they became more and more frenzied. The demonic race probably knew very well that whether they could take down the gate of Heavenly Demon depended on this day. The gate of Heavenly Demon was only open for 3 days each time, and it was already the 3rd day now. It was the last day, the day of the final outcome. Chapter 12:19. On the side of the demons, the low-class demonic beasts gradually decreased. Saint King demonic beasts began to appear frequently. In just a short 15 minutes, a total of 3 Saint King demonic beasts had charged out together before retreating while riddled with wounds. On the other side, the dozen beast kings were so tired that their tongues were hanging out, panting heavily. The crane king, who cared the most about his image, and the monkey king, who was the most active, were all sitting on the ground, fighting for every bit of time they had. The million-strong mystical beast army was almost crippled. The eagle king, the crane king, the peacock king, and the other flying mystical beasts roared angrily into the sky. In Tianfa Forest, all the flying mystical beasts above the 9th level had gathered once again. The cries of the kings of the mystical beasts were already mixed with an indescribable sense of sorrow. These mystical beasts that had gathered now were the reinforcements of Tianfa Holy Land. They were supposed to take over the positions of these mystical beasts who were fighting now, defending the gate of Sky Demon against the invasion of the demonic beasts. But now this sudden and tragic battle had caused them to lose the chance to grow. With their current cultivation base, they could not be of any use in a head-on battle. They could only be used in groups to charge down and self-destruct to form an effective attack. Yin Yang stood up. All the beast kings who are not participating in the battle, come over. I will instill the air of vitality again. Don't let those mystical beasts with insufficient cultivation base participate in the battle. The gains do not make up for the losses. The Bear King was shocked. Sect leader Yun, you can't do that. We are already grateful to receive such a heaven-defying art once. You've already become weak after using it once. If you use it again, I'm afraid. The Beast Kings knew that in such a situation, only the miraculous technique that sect leader Yun had used once could allow them to hold on for a while longer. However, they were too embarrassed to ask for more. The other party was already half dead after using it once. What face did they have to ask for more? Especially when the other party was still holding on to help everyone refine and repair their weapons. They had risked their lives, but the other party had also worked himself to death until now. Taking a step back, this matter was ultimately a matter of the mystical beast. If they were to forcefully pull the other party in and lose their lives because of it, how could they bear to do so? Yun Yang felt a sudden sense of shame as he said proudly, "The Beast Kings are willing to risk their lives to protect this continent. How can I, Yun Yang, be stingy with this bit of air of vitality? It's all right. Hurry up, I've already activated the secret technique. If no one receives it, it'll be a waste. I'm not joking." In that case, thank you very much. Crane King cupped his fists and turned his head to bellow, "Eagle King and I will take turns here. You guys go over quickly and recover." The 8 major beast kings staggered over and sat on the ground. With a crashing sound, the blood on their bodies formed a line on the ground. The heavenly demon gate is like this. The Monkey King had a helpless expression. If all the high-level mystical beasts participating in the battle were to be given a stream of chi of vitality, it would be impossible even if they were to turn Yun Yang and Emmy into dried corpses 180 times. However, although Yun Yang would still feel his body being hollowed out and Emmy crying out that it could not take it, it was still within the range of what it could bear. The dozen or so beast kings who had regained their energy and vitality once again took turns to battle. With the help of Yun Yang's painstaking and costly supply of medicine and weapons, the mystical beast army finally did not have to resort to the most extreme method of self-destruction anymore. Instead, they would retreat after a while and another tribe would take their place. The cycle repeated itself in an orderly manner. Compared to before, the battle was still intense and even more intense, but the casualties were much less than before. There was even some time to rest occasionally. Bear King, who had withstood another round of extreme output, staggered over. His golden fur trembled, and blood flowed out of the many wounds that were protected by Shen Qi at the same time, forming a large pool. However, now that he had a chance to catch his breath, this injury was nothing. As long as he quickly circulated his qi to regulate his breathing, his powerful body would naturally recover extremely quickly. He sat on the ground and sighed. This battle was really depressing. This time, the battle of the Gate of Heavenly Demons came suddenly without any warning. Especially the range of the Gate of Heavenly Demons that suddenly appeared is far greater than before. If we were prepared and sent the golden armored ants, wouldn't we have died? Bear King, who had endured another round of extreme output, staggered over. Crane King scolded jokingly, "Only you can think of that? Won't the golden armored ants die? If it's a real battle of attrition, the golden armored ants are invincible, but the other party will fight head-on with you stupidly. Once they're released, they don't even need to be like the wind and travel thousands of miles. As long as they're a little faster, the golden armored ants won't be able to catch up. If they run a little faster, the F*King ants won't even be able to see them." Bear King guffawed. The flying speed of the golden armored ants isn't bad. What's the use of having too few of them? Monkey King's words were concise and to the point. The other kings nodded in agreement. As they spoke, it was time for the defense to be changed again. Crane King and Monkey King led their tribe to take up the position. Golden armored ants? Yun Yang recalled the millions of ants he had seen, but those ants seemed to be silver in color and their individual strength was relatively limited. Could there be something else that the Beast Kings had said just now? The golden armored ants are a very powerful tribe in the Holy Land of Divine Punishment. Although the highest level Ant King is only level 7, if they develop to a certain number, they're enough to kill any master in this world. They're considered invincible in another sense. The one who spoke was the Condor King, who had been silent all this while. The Condor King was covered in black feathers and looked mighty and domineering, but he was a man of few words and did not speak a single word. Now that he had suddenly spoken, it was filled with a sense of regret. Invincible in this world? Enough to kill any master in this world? Yun Yang asked in surprise, obviously doubtful of this statement. However, the Condor King only mumbled a few words and did not continue. The Lion King coughed and said with a smile, "The golden armored ants are only first-level mystical beasts when they are born. As they grow, their individual strength will gradually rise to 5th-level mystical beast. After that, it's relatively difficult for them to improve. However, the ants are known for their numbers. About 1 in 1,000 ants will mutate into a flying ant. The flying ants are much stronger than the other golden armored ants, be it in terms of strength or combat ability. They have at least the combat power of a 6th-level mystical beast. However, while flying ants possess strength that far surpasses their peers, they will also lose the fertility of their inherited bloodline. Thus, to produce flying ants cannot be done through normal breeding and can only rely on luck. But the process of accumulating individual flying ants is undoubtedly a very long one. Even after 100 years, the flying ant army of the golden armored ants is no more than 100,000. It's not very useful and can't help the situation." At this point, the Lion King sighed. They were supposed to be the strongest race in Tianfa Holy Land, but because they violated the laws of heaven, they were punished to this state. Now, the golden armored ants are practically the weakest race in the entire Tianfa Holy Land. Violated the law of heaven? What do you mean? And Apple and Apt Mobile Reading Access, M. Chapter 12:20. What do you mean? The Leonis King laughed like he was crying. Sigh, the golden armored ants ran amok in Tianfa Holy Land back then, no one dared to provoke them. Later on, when their population reached 10 billion, the arrogant Ant King became arrogant and didn't allow others to call him Beast King. He gave himself a name, the Ant Monarch. The Lion King rolled his eyes. On the day he invited the kings of the Holy Land to a gathering and officially named himself the Ant Monarch, he was struck by lightning as soon as he stepped out of the door. The mighty Ant Monarch vanished into thin air. "Oh, so this is Tianfa?" Yun Yang was obviously interested as he asked. If that was all, the golden armored ants might not necessarily have declined. After all, they were the tribe with the largest population in the Tianfa Holy Land at that time. Even though their king had fallen, their foundation was still there. The true punishment of the heavenly Tao was that all the male ants of the golden armored ants lost their ability to reproduce collectively. This situation caused the female ants of the entire tribe to riot a few years later. Both sexes fought fiercely. After that battle, the entire golden armored ants only had a few million left. Then after a few years, the surviving ants discovered that some of their abilities had recovered. But the previous war was too intense, and there were almost no female ants to be found. 99% of the male ants could only be single. During that period of time, even the old female ants who were missing arms and legs were worshipped by hundreds or thousands of male ants as queens. This also led to a change in the dominant position of the golden armored ants. In the entire Tianfa Holy Land, the males are the kings of all tribes, but only the golden armored ants. The females are the kings, the masters of the family, and their words are final. The Leonis King sighed. The golden armored ants now, sigh, it's a long story. Such a brutal battle that concerns the future of Tianfa Holy Land, yet not a single one of them came to help. They must all be kneeling in their own homes. As he spoke, he looked at Yun Yang with a gleam in his eyes. The corners of Yun Yang's lips twitched. Why are you telling me this when the war is in full swing? You've been nagging for so long just to tell me about this group of henpecked shrimps? Isn't that a little too disappointing? The other beast kings coughed and stood up. We're going to fight. Then they disappeared in a flash. Yun Yang smiled faintly and said, "What does Leo King mean by this? Please tell me the deep meaning behind your words." A trace of awkwardness appeared on the Lion King's furry face. If it was a different occasion and place, I would definitely not expose myself. This is a great humiliation to the Tian-Fa Holy Land. It's not worthy for outsiders to know about it. But this matter happened a very, very long time ago. Time is naturally not the reason. But after that incident, there was still a stone tablet left behind. Other than warning the golden armored ants, there was a final sentence. If one day someone is able to bestow the Tian-Fa Holy Land with life origin chi, at that time the golden armored ants will be able to escape from this tragic fate, and there will be hope for them to regain their former glory. Leonis stammered. I see. Lord Leo King thinks that I'm that person. Yun Yang snorted. Leader Yun, I know that I'm asking too much, but the golden armored ants, other than their low individual combat power, are the best among all the tribes in the Tian-Fa Holy Land in terms of reproduction. A single nest of eggs laid by a female ant can produce at least thousands of golden armored ants. Only then is the Tian-Fa Holy Land at its strongest. With the golden armored ants guarding the Holy Land, it's truly foolproof. No matter which enemy invades, the golden armored ants can launch an all-encompassing attack from the sky to the ground. No matter how strong the enemy is, there's nothing to be afraid of. For example, the Gate of Heaven demon can be guarded by the golden armored ants. Not only can it reduce the number of high-level casualties, it can also ensure that there's no danger. Ever since the golden armored ants courted their own death and fell into the abyss, until now we can only use the much weaker silver armored ants as the defense line to separate the Tian-Fa Holy Land from the outside world. The defense is not as simple as just a level of decline. Sigh. Leonis gave a heartfelt sigh. Yun Yang was puzzled. I understand Lord Leo King's painstaking effort, but even if I'm willing to help, how can I help them? I don't even have the slightest clue about this. Leonis was energized and said with a shake of his head and tail, what you need to do is actually very simple. There's a spring in the golden armored ants colony, and what flows in it is the black gold water. If other tribes drink it, they'll be poisoned and die immediately without exception, but the golden armored ants need to drink this water for years to survive and advance. Leader Yun, you only need to send a gust of the air of vitality into the spring. The reason why the golden armored ants have lost their ability to reproduce is because that expert has blocked the air of vitality. It's simple and direct to break it. We only need to connect the air of vitality with the air of vitality that's sealed in the spring, and everything will be solved. Leonis sighed. This method sounds simple, but how can it be so easy to obtain the air of vitality that's of the same origin as Tao? What's more, we can't even get out. Yun Yang thought to himself, even if all of you get out and search the entire bound of universe, you probably won't be able to find this air of vitality. If that's the case, it's really simple. After the battle at the Gate of Sky Demon is over, I'll make a trip there and remove this shackle for the golden armored ants. Yun Yang agreed readily. Now that he knew what the method was, it was really just a matter of lifting a finger. Thank you, Leader Yun, for fulfilling my wish. Leonis was not the only one who said this. Yun Yang looked in the direction of the voice and saw hundreds of golden ants the size of camels standing up from the ground on his left, bowing respectfully in his direction. Yun Yang could not help but be shocked as he turned to glare at Leo King. Didn't you say that these ants were serving their wives at home? Why did so many of them suddenly appear? What if I was putting on an act just now and deliberately put on a show? Did you think that the air of vitality was cabbage that could be given away just like that? Besides, these golden armored ants were really amazing. Although he had been busy all this time, he had still paid attention to the movements around him, but he had not discovered their ultimate destination. One had to know that with their relatively large size of ants, not a single sound could be heard in the holy land of Tian-Fa that was covered in fallen leaves. This was, of course, quite an amazing thing. Leonis chuckled. Leader Yun, don't blame me, cough. The leading golden armored ant was especially large, its golden armor shining with a dark golden luster. It said in a low voice, Leader Yun, don't blame Leonis. We, the golden armored ants, have been in dire straits until now. We don't even dare to participate in the battle for the survival of the holy land of Tian-Fa, lest the tribe be annihilated. How can we be considered top-notch mystical beast? If we were humans, we would be cowards. This golden armored ant smiled bleakly and said, the golden armored ants are the most responsible in the holy land of Tian-Fa. But now we're living so aggrieved. As males, we're no longer masculine. As warriors, we can't fight. We've become a bunch of pitiful henpecked worms. Just now, Leonis said that none of us came to participate in the battle, that we're all kneeling at home. This is very true. We, the golden armored ants, have been kneeling for hundreds of thousands of years, but we still can't stand up. Hundreds of golden armored ants suddenly knelt on the ground. Thank you, Leader Yun, for your help. Please, Leader Yun. The moment the golden armored ants knelt on the ground, Yun Yang actually saw drops of tears dripping onto the ground. He could not help but feel shaken. Don't worry. Yun Yang said with a sigh, I will do my best to accomplish this. The faces of over 100 golden armored ants were full of vicissitudes, endlessly desolate. They turned their heads and looked at the bloody battlefield, their faces a little twisted. Since when did the golden armored ants, who had never been afraid of battle and sacrifice, not even dare to enter the battlefield? This was an extreme humiliation. However, every time they proposed to participate in the battle, the other beast kings would resolutely disagree. With your current ability, there really won't be any more golden armored ants after this battle. No. There's no room for discussion. They were rejected like this again and again. When they returned to their nests after being rejected, the contemptuous gaze of their wives as if they were looking at cowards, made the golden armored ants even more ashamed. This was how they behaved collectively. If there were other species that were similar to them, the golden armored ants would have been made a cuckold long ago. As males in the holy land of Tianfa, where the strong were respected, they had no dignity at all. It was truly a fate worse than death. On the other side, the beast kings led their armies and fought fiercely in waves. Demons and Shen beasts kept charging forward. There's only 4 hours left, it's the final time limit of this battle. Leonis looked at the battle situation as his eyes widened into round circles. In his hands, there were 2 giant hammers that weighed thousands of caddies. These 2 hammers were shiny and round. The Lion King especially liked them and was extremely fond of them. He had specially begged Yun Yang to forge them for him. He hoped that this pair of hammers could be kept until the end of this battle, and then be a new spiritual weapon to accompany him for the rest of his life. In a while, I'll show you my lifetime's ultimate skill. The King of Leo said proudly, Lion Rolling Silk Ball. Not a bad name. I'm really sorry for today, it's only this chapter. It's Women's Day. GT. Chapter 12:21. As time passed, the moment when the gate of Sky Demon would close was approaching. The beast kings of Tianfa's expressions grew more solemn and solemn. This last moment was often the most dangerous. When one thought that the defense this time was foolproof, it was usually when a huge change would occur. The beast kings were well aware of this fact. The gate of Sky Demon had its rules. Those above the level of Royal Saint could not enter. However, that was only for the demon race. The Holy Land of Tianfa as the defense did not have such a taboo. However, there were also corresponding concerns in this situation. If a holy venerable level beast king entered the Sky Demon portal due to some kind of fortuitous encounter, and the other demons also sent holy venerable level beast kings in, the energy balance of the passageway would be maintained and would not collapse. In other words, the other side could not enter, but as long as one side could enter, the other side could enter. This taboo was an absolute taboo that the Holy Land of Tianfa dared not violate no matter what. If they sent their Supreme Saint and the other side's Supreme Saint came in as well, then the gate of Sky Demon would become a smooth path for the massive demon race. No one could bear the consequences of this. There was still an hour and a half left. 2 hours left. 35 minutes left. There was still an hour left. As time passed, the demon race in the gate of Sky Demon began to dwindle. It was as if the demon race had decided to give up on this battle for the gate. In spite of this, the beast kings of Tianfa stood up one by one, their eyes fixed on the gate of Sky Demon unblinkingly. Their expressions were unprecedentedly tense, their weapons gripped tightly in their hands, ready to strike at any moment. Yun Yang was also highly anxious due to the tense atmosphere. He seized every second to create a few more weapons and placed them where the beast kings could easily reach them. The beast kings were extremely tense now, to the point where they could not add even a feather. Yun Yang, who understood this well, was afraid of triggering a chain reaction and causing adverse consequences even if he sent the weapons. Up until now, Yun Yang had refined and recast more than 100 heavy and super heavy weapons. The countless broken weapons in the Holy Land of Divine Punishment had basically been looted clean. Emmy was exhausted, feeling like its body had been emptied dozens of times. Yun Yang thought about it and forced Emmy to bring out a few more bottles of medicinal pills, bringing them all out as well. At a time like this, the more war resources he had, the better. So what if his body was hollowed out? Squeeze and squeeze again. If you're a man, don't say that you can't do it. While Emmy struggled to hold on, it roared, "I, Lord Emmy, have already dug everything clean, all right? What more do I have to squeeze? Also, although I am a rare divine being and a peerless spiritual plant, I am not a man." There was still a final quarter of an hour to go. With a low roar, the passageway suddenly revealed an extremely dense demonic aura. In an instant, the demonic aura rose and covered the sky. At the same time, two huge white jade-like horns appeared on the other side of the Sky Demon's gate. However, only these two horns could be seen on the other side of the demon clan's body, and no other parts could be seen. A low voice said, "Which beast king from the holy land of divine punishment is it outside this time?" "The single-horned old rhinoceros greets you." Outside, the usually audacious and fearless bear king sucked in a breath of cold air. "It's a single-horned rhinoceros. A fourth-level Saint Emperor single-horned rhinoceros. And there were two of them." The beast king's expressions turned even uglier. Yun Yang's expression also turned grim. Looking at the expressions of the beast kings, no one could match a fourth-level Saint Emperor single-horned rhinoceros. The disparity in levels was not something that a handy weapon and some supplies could make up for. Especially when the opponent had sent out two of them at once, the disparity was even greater. Suddenly, a long iron rod extended out of the cave without any warning. Although it was called a rod, the thickness of the rod was like the trunk of a towering tree that had been growing for hundreds or thousands of years. It was so thick that it would take several people to wrap their arms around it. It was extremely intimidating, as if it could hold up the heavens. Facing this sudden change, the Bear King, who was closest to the cave, roared like a madman. As it let out a hoarse roar, its entire body rapidly grew at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the blink of an eye, it had already become a towering giant. An unprecedentedly dazzling light burst out from his body. He roared repeatedly and rushed forward. The huge hammer in his hand was raised once again. With a roar, an earth-shattering hammer smashed down. For this strike, the Bear King had been accumulating power for a long time, and had already gathered the peak of his strength. In terms of strength alone, the might of this strike was even above the all-out strike from before. At the same time, the Ox King, Lion King, and Tiger King also roared and charged forward. Naturally, the demons on the other side did not know that their king was not present. But everyone on their side was well aware of this. They had been suppressing the other party with all their might so that they would not discover the actual situation on their side. If the other party had already discovered that their Saint Venerable was not present, they would have sent out a peak Saint Emperor to charge over. After all, the other party's Saint Emperor was also considered a high-level existence. They could not just charge over and sacrifice themselves for nothing. Fortunately, they had managed to conceal this process well. But now, at the final moment, the other party had already reached the point where they would fight with their lives on the line. Even if they knew that it was suicide, they still had to try. Because if they did not try, they would have to wait for 100 years. This was also the reason why the two peak Saint Emperors had appeared and asked a question in the tunnel instead of charging out directly. If they could not defeat these two single-horned rhinoceroses head-on in the first wave, they would fall into a completely passive state. The situation would take a turn for the worse, and it would be difficult to reverse the situation. It was obvious that the demons were using the same tactic as before. They would first use numbers to exhaust the energy of the guards as much as possible. Then, in the final moment, they would use the full power of Peak Saint Kings to end the battle in a single stroke. A loud explosion rang out. The 6 experts collided fiercely at the entrance of the tunnel. The resulting shockwave almost blasted a huge hole in the sky. An angry voice rang out from within. "Where is the King of Tianfe? How dare you use such a second-rate character to humiliate us? How dare you?" There was anger in the voice, but there was also a sense of relief. Chapter 12:22. King Bear guffawed. Second-rate characters? So what if you're second-rate characters? Haven't you all been thrown back by me? You can't even win against a second-rate character. The so-called demon race's experts are getting worse with each generation. Will there still be a place for the demon race in this world 100 years from now? The Bear King laughed crazily, and his words were extremely sharp and sarcastic. However, they were not as incisive as his mouth. It had nothing to do with the grand scheme of things. Instead, it attracted an even more violent backlash. With a sneer from the other side, the 2 large metal rods appeared once again. With 2 loud booms, the sabers that King Leo and King Tiger had sent flying were deflected as they staggered. The moment the attack succeeded, the 2 huge horns also protruded out of the hole, and an extremely thick leg followed closely behind. That unstoppable momentum, coupled with the stomp of the leg, even caused the earth to shake and the mountains to shake, making one's skin crawl. King Bear's sledgehammer came crashing down again, its force no different from before. An earth-shattering boom erupted in the air as it clashed with the opponent's metal rods. However, the opponent's metal rods were heavy and heavy. Despite being on the defensive, King Bear was not at a disadvantage. Although King Bear was already fighting with all his might, pushing his strength to the limit and even activating the arcane art of life, he still could not increase the results of the battle. The sledgehammer in his hand continued to crack from the opponent's counterattack. Two majestic silhouettes with a towering demonic aura had already appeared at the door of Sky Demon's door. King Bear, King Tiger and King Lion were furious. Although they tried to stabilize themselves, they were constantly being pushed back. The distance between them was growing further and further apart, to the point that they did not even have the space to self-destruct. Although there were flying mystical beasts that were willing to risk their lives to join in the battle and self-destruct, the disparity in cultivation base made the power of their self-destruction not even enough to make the two Saint Emperors of the demon race retreat. Please? A desolate cry rang in Yun Yang's ears and his heart skipped a beat. Then over 300 golden armored ants flew up in unison, charging towards the Sky Demon's door. The distance of thousands of feet was covered in the blink of an eye with a flap of their wings. This was the golden armored ants' request to him. There's hope for the tribe. We can sacrifice ourselves. Boom. Just as the 300 golden armored ants reached the Sky Demon gate, the two one-horned rhinoceroses rushed out. With a sharp roar, the 300 golden armored ants roared at the same time, and a white light flashed. 300 golden armors exploded at the same time. Suddenly, a thick, golden, mysterious silk net appeared outside the Sky Demon door and completely covered the entire door. Yun Yang's eyes widened in disbelief. The last three words of the golden armored ant were obviously asking him to help their race, but that was for later. What truly shocked Yun Yang was the collective self-destruction of over 300 golden armored ants. Without a shred of hesitation, he left without hesitation. Yun Yang drew his saber. Sword transformation. He was very tired. He was about to reach his limit. However, he had no choice but to make a move. Layers upon layers of golden silk webs covered the entrance of the heavenly demon door. Crazy roars could be heard coming from within the silk webs, and loud rumbling noises could be heard. Again and again, protrusions protruded out of the silk webs that covered the entrance of the heavenly demon door, charging left and right. The defense of the golden silk net was undoubtedly strong, beyond Yun Yang's expectations, but it still had its limits. The golden silk net was about to collapse. However, 10 breaths had passed. The collective self-destruction of over 300 golden armored ants had bought 10 breaths worth of time. The Monkey King once said that the golden armored ant clan had tens of billions of members when they were at their most numerous. Judging from the strength of the 300 or so golden armored ants, it was obvious that they were far from the strongest combat strength of the golden armored ants. Then, in the past, the golden armored ants were able to firmly guard the Sky Demon gate without any mistakes. How could it be just believable? It was unquestionable and without any room for doubt. With a quick glance, Yun Yang was shocked to see that not only were the Bear King's hands bleeding profusely and his hammer stained red, the other Beast Kings were also covered in blood and injuries. The Tiger King's injury was the most severe. His right arm was twisted like a fried dough twist, pale white bones protruding from his flesh. In less than a breath's time, a large rod broke through the golden silk net with a loud bang. With a piercing sound like silk being torn, the golden silk net shattered and vanished without a trace. The eyes of the Bear King and the others were filled with despair. The Tiger King roared in despair, "Brothers, let us all be on our way." The Beast Kings did not waste any words nor did they hesitate. Each of them glowed brilliantly, just like the 300 golden armored ants from before. Other than self-detonation, they had no other way to deal with the other party. They did not fear death at all, but they were still terrified. They were confident that they could repel the other party after their collective self-detonation, but they did not have the confidence to kill the other party, especially the two fourth-level Saint Emperors from the demon race. There was still some time before the Sky Demon Gate closed, but that little bit of time was enough to cause terrifying consequences. In other words, even if they self-detonated, the Sky Demon Gate would most likely not be able to be defended this time. However, it was at this moment, when the Beast Kings had gone to the extreme but were still filled with despair, they saw an extremely dazzling sword light suddenly soar into the sky, illuminating the universe. Everyone looked over instinctively, only to see a small sun suddenly appear in the sky. Its radiance was incomparably dazzling. In the middle of the light, a voice that sounded like it was singing slowly said, "What harm is there in slaughtering the entire world?" Following that, the light suddenly blossomed with a kind of green brilliance. That was because the blazing white sword light was so dense that it created an illusion. That dazzling sword light was like thousands of thunderbolts exploding at the same time, shooting out a magnificent sword chi that was hundreds of feet long, like the Milky Way was pouring down to the mortal world, crashing down. Just as everyone's attention was focused on it, this sword light rushed straight into the sky demon gate with an unstoppable force, entering forcefully. Following that, the hundreds of feet long sword light that appeared in the sky also followed closely behind. Boom. Even the Bear King and the other Beast Kings outside the door felt as if their skin had been cut open. It was clearly just the remnant sword chi, but it was still able to cut and injure the powerful bodies of the Beast Kings. Facing the sword light head-on, one could only imagine the amount of damage they had to endure. It could only be described with the word, horrifying. Facing this sudden shocking sword light were the two Saint Emperor single-horned rhinoceroses that had already rushed out of the Sky Demon Gate. These two fellows let out incomparably tragic cries. No, it should be said that after the first syllable they suddenly stopped. Abruptly stopped. That incomparably sharp sword chi instantly filled the entire Sky Demon Gate. LTGT. Chapter 12:23. The dazzling sword light surged forward. It was like the scorching sun high up in the sky, shining on sporadic snowflakes. The two single-horned rhinoceroses only managed to make a few sounds in that instant before they were reduced to mincemeat. The powerful sword chi did not slow down even after killing the Fourth Order Saint King. It continued to sweep through the heavenly demon door like a dragon. A series of miserable cries resounded through the sky as blood poured out of the heavenly demon door like a waterfall. The corners of the Beast King's mouths twitched, their eyes and mouths slanted. Just how many demons had been killed by that sword? Why was the river of blood that flowed out like a waterfall? Moreover, it was the kind that flowed endlessly and endlessly. The screeching of the sword energy seemed to be continuing, but the cries on the other end seemed to be 1,000 feet away from the tunnel. The next moment, the majestic sword light flashed again. Yun Yang's robe had turned crimson-purple as he retreated. Only the sharp sword in his hand was still gleaming with a chilling glint. However, when he was hundreds of feet away, he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes were shut tight as he fell straight to the ground, unconscious. With Yun Yang's current cultivation base, it was impossible for him to unleash such power. The strike just now was the culmination of Yun Yang's cultivation base, the chi of endless vitality, the mystical chi that he had been accumulating for a long time, in addition to the 13 streams of air of vitality that Emi had squeezed out with all its might and the power of its soul. All of these had been unleashed at the same time. This was the fiercest attack Yun Yang had ever unleashed in his life. At the same time, it was also the highest output he had ever exerted in this world. At this critical moment, Yun Yang had no other choice. With his cultivation base that had just broken through to first-level Saint Emperor Pinnacle, it was impossible for him to defeat two fourth-level Saint Emperors at once. The only thing that could work now was this one move. Yun Yang would give it a try with everything he had. Yun Yang had always known that the spiritual chi required for this move was too much. If his cultivation base was too low, he would not be able to unleash the effect, far from being able to help the current situation. Moreover, his opponents were two fourth-level Saint Emperors. Yun Yang was even worried that he might not be able to hurt his opponent even if he were to unleash his full strength. Therefore, Yun Yang had decisively drained all of his spiritual energy and everything that Emi could provide to the original owner. He had unleashed this move with an extreme decisiveness that even he himself hadn't expected. After launching this move, the only thing he could do afterwards was to follow the momentum of the sword and charge forward. At this time, the Sky Demon passageway was filled with demon race members. These demon race members were all ready, waiting for the two single-horned rhinoceroses to break the passageway. Then they would immediately rush out and rush into the Tianfa holy land that the demon race had yearned for generations. The demons were squeezed one by one, and it was not just one against one. The space that was supposed to be able to stand two people was now filled with 3 or 4 bodies. Amidst the densely packed demons, Yun Yang broke through the single-horned rhinoceros with a swing of his sword, killed it, and slashed it into pieces before charging in. Like a bulldozer, he pushed forward with irresistible force and unstoppable courage. Wherever it passed, all the demons were minced into dust without exception. There were no exceptions. Yun Yang's charge could have covered at least 20,000 feet in the spacious passageway, but faced with the densely packed demons that were squeezing the passageway, Yun Yang had only managed to cover 1,000 feet before his sword energy was depleted. In spite of this, Yun Yang understood that this 1,000-feet charge would have killed at least tens of thousands of demons with this single slash. It was too densely packed. Then he felt lethargic, as if he might not be able to hold on at any time. He might be out of breath or even out of energy. Decisively, he mobilized the last bit of energy he had left and charged back. The demons in front of him in all shapes and sizes were dumbfounded, unable to react in time. They were still squeezed in the passageway, feeling uncomfortable and wanting to curse, but in the next moment, there was only emptiness before them. Everything had happened so suddenly and inconceivably. How did more than half of the demon race demonic beasts in front of him evaporate? Where did they disappear to? Only the blood under his feet had suddenly reached his ankles. It was wet and slippery. There was also a human who had suddenly appeared, but he had already retreating to the outside of the Sky Demon Gateway. All the demonic beasts only felt a blur in front of their eyes, and then there was nothing else. Chase. Charge. How to chase. How to charge. Every demonic beast's legs had turned to jelly at this moment. After being stunned for a long time, the demons at the back who did not know what had happened could not hold it in and began to squeeze forward instinctively. Only then did these demonic beasts come to their senses. However, as soon as their feet moved, they fell to the ground and were trampled by the countless demonic beasts that were rushing forward crazily. Those who stepped on the demonic beasts in front of them were stunned by the scene in front of them. The further they went, the more terrified they became, and they shuddered. What happened? Why is there an empty passageway in front of me? Why are there no demonic beasts in front of me? And what is under my feet? Why did the passageway suddenly become so smelly and fishy? Outside. Quickly take care of Leader Yun and bring the rest of the medicine over, quickly. King Bear's lips trembled as he roared, "The rest of you follow me. There's only a little time left. We must defend it. We must defend it at all costs." Without exception, all the Beast Kings were pale and sweating profusely. Half of it was from fear, the other half was actually from fear as well. It was just that the first half was due to the loss of the Sky Demon Gateway, while the other half was due to Yun Yang's sword. There was actually such a sword in this world. Did they not hear Leader Yun's shout? What harm is there in slaughtering the family? This sword, if there was enough power to execute this sword, perhaps it could really slaughter the family? It was too terrifying. The Beast King's prediction of the demon race did not happen again. For the rest of the time, there were only sporadic demonic beasts that emerged to fight again. Their combat power was not very high either, so the last bit of fighting was a waste of time. The rainbow light that the mystical beasts were anticipating suddenly disappeared. The heavenly demon door slowly shrank. In the end, only the head of a tiger demon could be seen roaring a few times at the entrance of the passageway before it was hidden in the colorful light. When I wrote this move, I obviously felt different from before. My state of mind was different. Apt. Mobile Reading Access, M. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.